He pulled a woman from a burning taxi, saving her life without hesitation. But when the flames died down and he saw what hung around her neck, his blood ran cold. A silver locket that had been buried with his wife 3 years ago. The same locket, the same photo inside. As the woman whispered his name before losing consciousness, Noah Grant realized that everything he knew about his wife's death had been a lie. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The rain came down in sheets that November night, turning the streets of Seattle into rivers of black glass that reflected the neon signs and traffic lights like fractured dreams. Noah Grant gripped the steering wheel of his old Ford pickup, his knuckles white against the worn leather, as he navigated through the downpour. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm. Thump, 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 thump. A metronome counting down the minutes until he could get home to his daughter. It was nearly midnight, and exhaustion sat heavy on Noah's shoulders like a wet blanket. His shift at the community center had run late again, the third time this week. Since leaving his job as a paramedic 2 years ago, he'd been piecing together a living from whatever work he could find. Security guard, maintenance supervisor, handyman. Tonight, he'd been filling in for a janitor who'd called in sick, mopping floors and emptying trash cans while his mind wandered to places he'd rather it didn't go. The intersection of Pike and 8th Avenue was nearly deserted at this hour. A few stragglers hurried along the sidewalks, hunched against the rain, their umbrellas doing little to shield them from the relentless downpour. The traffic light ahead turned yellow, then red, and Noah eased his foot onto the brake. His truck came to a stop with a slight shudder. He really needed to get that transmission checked, but there was never enough money, never enough time. He was thinking about his daughter, Lily, asleep at home with Mrs. Chen from downstairs watching over her. She'd be 9 years old next month, 9 years old and growing up without a mother. The thought was a familiar ache, a wound that had never quite healed despite the passage of 3 years. Sarah. Her name was a whisper in his mind, a ghost that haunted the quiet moments. Sarah, with her laugh like morning birdsong and her hands that could bandage a wound or braid their daughter's hair with equal grace. Sarah, who'd been taken from them in a car crash on a rain-soaked night not unlike this one, her Civic spinning out on the I-5 and slamming into a concrete barrier at 70 miles per hour. The police had said she'd died instantly. That was supposed to be a comfort. It wasn't. The light was still red. Noah rubbed his eyes, feeling the grit of fatigue beneath his eyelids. 2 more minutes, and he'd be moving again. 5 more blocks, and he'd be home. He could already taste the coffee he'd brew, feel the weight of his daughter's head against his shoulder as he checked on her before collapsing into bed himself. That's when the world exploded. The sound came first, a deafening boom that rattled the windows of his truck and set off car alarms up and down the block. Then light, brilliant and orange, blooming like a malevolent flower in the intersection ahead. Noah's combat instincts, trained into him during his years as a paramedic and never quite forgotten, kicked in before his conscious mind could process what was happening. A yellow taxi had erupted into flames. The vehicle was spinning, a deadly carousel of metal and fire, its momentum carrying it across the wet pavement in a graceful, horrifying arc. It slammed into a streetlight with a screech of tearing metal, the impact so violent that the pole bent at a 45-degree angle, sparks raining down as electrical wires tore free. The taxi's horn blared, a continuous wail that mixed with the sound of shattering glass and the hungry roar of flames. Noah's foot was already on the gas pedal. His truck surged forward, jumping the red light, tires hydroplaning on the slick street as he cut a sharp right and skidded to a stop 10 feet from the burning wreckage. Through the flames and smoke, he could see the taxi's interior, seats engulfed, dashboard melting, and in the back seat, silhouetted against the fire, a figure. Someone was still inside. Jesus Christ, Noah breathed, his paramedic training flooding back with crystalline clarity. He yanked his keys from the ignition, grabbed the heavy canvas jacket from the passenger seat, and threw open his door. The heat hit him like a physical force, a wall of scorching air that made his eyes water and his lungs constrict. Behind him, he heard shouting. Someone screaming. The sound of footsteps running away rather than toward the inferno. But Noah was already moving, his body remembering what his mind had tried to forget. The countless times he'd run toward disaster while others ran away. The weight of responsibility that came with being someone who saved lives. The driver's side door was crushed beyond recognition, folded inward by the impact with the streetlight like a piece of discarded aluminum foil. Flames licked out from under the hood, fed by leaking gasoline that spread in a glowing pool across the pavement. Noah circled to the passenger side, using his jacket to shield his face from the intense heat. The smoke was thick and black, carrying the acrid stench of burning rubber, plastic, and something worse, the sickly sweet smell of cooking meat that he recognized from too many accident scenes. Through the rear passenger window, he could see her more clearly now. A woman, slumped against the door, her face turned away. Her arm was pressed against the glass, palm outward, as if she'd been trying to escape before losing consciousness. Blood ran down from a gash on her forehead, mixing with the condensation on the inside of the window. "I'm coming," Noah shouted, though he doubted she could hear him over the roar of the fire. He wrapped his jacket around his hand and slammed his elbow against the window. Once, twice. The safety glass spiderwebbed, but didn't break. Behind him, he heard the whump of another ignition. The flames had reached the engine compartment. He had seconds, not minutes. Noah looked around desperately and spotted a loose chunk of concrete from a broken curb. He grabbed it, hefted its weight, and brought it down on the window with all his strength. The glass exploded inward in a shower of crystalline fragments. Smoke and heat billowed out through the opening, and Noah had to turn away, coughing and gasping. "Stay with me," he called out, reaching through the shattered window. His hand found her arm, still warm, thank God, and he felt for a pulse. There, weak but steady. "I've got you." The door was locked from the inside. Of course it was. Nothing was ever easy. Noah's fingers fumbled for the lock release, his skin screaming as it made contact with the superheated metal of the door panel. He found it, yanked it up, and pulled the door handle. The door swung open, releasing another wave of smoke and heat that nearly drove him back. The woman tumbled partway out, held in place only by her seatbelt. Noah could see her more clearly now. Late 20s or early 30s, dark hair matted with blood, dressed in jeans and a leather jacket that had probably saved her from worse burns. Her face was streaked with soot, eyes closed, lips parted slightly as she struggled to breathe the poison air. No time for finesse. Noah reached across her lap and found the seatbelt release. It clicked, and suddenly her full weight was falling toward him. He caught her, one arm around her waist, the other supporting her head, and pulled her free of the taxi. She was dead weight in his arms, completely unconscious, and heavier than her slight frame suggested. He stumbled backward, his foot catching on the curb, but he managed to keep his balance and carry her away from the burning vehicle. 20 feet, 30, 40. He laid her down on the wet pavement, well clear of the flames, and immediately began his assessment. ABC: airway, breathing, circulation. The basics he'd learned as a paramedic and practiced thousands of times. Airway. He tilted her head back gently, checking for obstructions. Clear, but she was breathing in shallow, rapid gasps that suggested smoke inhalation. Breathing. Her chest rose and fell irregularly. He needed to get oxygen into her system, but he had no equipment, no ambulance standing by, just his hands and his training and the rain that fell like tears from the dark sky above. Circulation. He checked her pulse again at the carotid artery. Rapid, but not thready. Blood pressure was probably dropping, but she was alive. She was alive. Behind him, the taxi exploded again with a sound like the end of the world. Noah instinctively covered the woman's body with his own, feeling the wave of heat wash over them both. Burning debris rained down around them, pieces of metal, chunks of tire, fragments of things he couldn't identify and didn't want to. When the initial blast subsided, he looked up to see the taxi had become a roaring bonfire, flames reaching 15 feet into the night sky. In the distance, he could hear sirens. Good. The fire department would be here soon, and an ambulance. He just had to keep her stable until then. Noah turned his attention back to the woman, wiping rain and soot from her face with the sleeve of his shirt. She was young, he realized now, probably not even 30. Pretty in a sharp-featured way that reminded him of... No. He pushed the thought away before it could fully form. He'd been doing that for 3 years now, pushing away every memory, every reminder, every ghost of the woman he'd lost. He was checking the woman for signs of burns or broken bones when his hand brushed against something cold and metallic hanging from her neck. A necklace of some kind. Probably nothing important, but in trauma situations you documented everything. Noah's fingers closed around the pendant, drawing it out from beneath the collar of her leather jacket so he could see it clearly in the light of the burning taxi. His breath caught in his throat. It was a locket. A silver locket, oval-shaped, about the size of a quarter, with delicate filigree work around the edges. He knew this locket. He knew it because he'd bought it for his wife on their 5th anniversary, had watched her face light up when she opened the velvet box, had fastened the clasp around her neck with trembling fingers while she laughed and cried at the same time. He knew it because it was supposed to be buried 6 feet underground in Evergreen Cemetery, resting against the chest of the woman who'd worn it every single day for the 3 years between that anniversary and the night she died. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Noah's hands shook as he held the locket, staring at it in disbelief. It couldn't be. It couldn't be the same one. There must be thousands of lockets like this, tens of thousands. It was just a coincidence, just his tired mind playing tricks on him, But even as his rational mind scrambled for explanations, his fingers were opening the locket with practiced familiarity. He knew exactly how much pressure to apply to the tiny clasp, knew the slight catch that required a gentle wiggle to release. The locket popped open. Inside was a photograph protected behind a thin layer of scratched plastic. Noah's vision swam as he stared at it. The photo showed a man holding an infant, both of them laughing at something beyond the frame. The man was younger, his face unlined by grief, his eyes bright with joy. The baby was wrapped in a pink blanket, her tiny hand reaching up to grab at the man's nose. It was Noah, and his daughter Lily. On the day she came home from the hospital, this was the photo Sarah had chosen to put in the locket. This exact photo, taken by one of the nurses who'd taken pity on the exhausted new father. Sarah had told him it was her favorite picture in the world, the image she wanted closest to her heart always. "No," Noah whispered, but the word came out as more of a sob. "No, this can't." The woman on the ground stirred, a soft moan escaping her lips. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a moment Noah saw her eyes, dark brown, the same shade as... "Noah," she whispered, and his heart stopped. She knew his name. This stranger, pulled from a burning taxi, wearing his dead wife's locket, knew his name. Her eyes focused on his face with obvious effort, and something that might have been recognition flickered in their depths. Her lips moved, forming words that Noah had to lean in close to hear over the crackling flames and approaching sirens. Sarah, she said... The woman's voice was barely audible, rough with smoke and pain. "She said you'd come. She said, you always come." Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp again. Noah knelt there in the rain, holding this strange woman, this impossible woman, feeling his entire reality crumbling around him like the burning taxi at his back. The locket hung between them, catching the firelight, the photo of his former joy mocking him from its place over this stranger's heart. The first fire truck rounded the corner, lights painting the scene in alternating shades of red and white. Behind it came an ambulance, then another, then police cars, the whole emergency circus that Noah had once been a part of. Firefighters jumped out, unrolling hoses, shouting orders. Paramedics rushed toward him with a stretcher and equipment, their practiced movements a familiar dance. "Sir, we'll take over from here," one of them said, a young guy with kind eyes and capable hands. "Sir? Are you injured?" Noah looked down at himself and realized he was covered in blood. Some his own from cuts he didn't remember receiving, most of it belonging to the woman he'd pulled from the flames. His shirt was singed, his hands blistered from the heat, his lungs raw from smoke. But none of that mattered. "The locket," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need to know about the locket." The paramedic exchanged a glance with his partner, the universal look of medical professionals dealing with someone in shock. "Sir, we really need you to step back and let us work. Are you family? Do you know this woman?" Noah started to say no, then stopped. Because that wasn't true, was it? He didn't know who this woman was, but she knew him. She knew Sarah. She was wearing Sarah's locket, carrying Sarah's photo. "I saved her," he said finally. "I pulled her out of the taxi." "You did good," the paramedic said, already moving to insert an IV line into the woman's arm. "Real good. You saved her life, but now we need space to work, okay? Just step back for us." Noah stood, his legs unsteady beneath him, and watched as the paramedics swarmed over the unconscious woman. They called out vital signs in rapid-fire medical shorthand that he understood perfectly. Blood pressure dropping, possible internal injuries, smoke inhalation, second-degree burns on her arms and legs. They loaded her onto the stretcher with efficient precision, covering her with a thermal blanket, securing straps across her chest and legs. "Wait!" Noah called out as they began to wheel her toward the ambulance. "Where are you taking her?" "Harborview," one of the paramedics called back without stopping. "Trauma center." Of course, Harborview Medical Center, where Noah had worked for 7 years, where he'd brought countless patients, where he still knew half the staff by name. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. A police officer approached, notebook in hand, questions ready. Noah answered them automatically, his mind elsewhere. Yes, he'd witnessed the explosion. No, he didn't know the victim. Yes, he was a former paramedic. No, he hadn't seen anyone else near the taxi before it exploded. The officer took his information, his insurance details, told him he might need to come down to the station for a more detailed statement tomorrow. Tomorrow. As if tomorrow mattered. As if anything mattered beyond the impossible locket now secured in Noah's pocket, pressed against his chest like a talisman or a curse. The fire department had extinguished the blaze, reducing the taxi to a smoking, twisted skeleton of metal. Investigators were already taking photos, documenting the scene, looking for clues about what had caused such a catastrophic explosion. Noah heard one of them mention the word suspicious and another respond with definitely accelerant involved. Not an accident, then. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had tried to murder the woman Noah had pulled from the flames. The woman wearing Sarah's locket. The woman who knew his name. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but Noah didn't notice. He stood there in the middle of Pike Avenue, surrounded by emergency vehicles and flashing lights, watching the ambulance carrying the mysterious woman disappear into the night. Around him, the city went about its business. Late-night travelers hurrying to their destinations, bar patrons stumbling home, the homeless seeking shelter in doorways. None of them knew. None of them understood that in this one rain-soaked intersection, everything Noah had believed about the worst night of his life had just been called into question. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Lily woke up, asking for you. Everything okay?" Everything okay. What a question. What a ridiculous, impossible question. Noah typed back with numb fingers. "Emergency at work. Be home soon. Tell her I love her." It wasn't exactly a lie. There was an emergency, even if it wasn't the kind Mrs. Chen would understand. And he would be home soon, eventually, after he did what he needed to do. He walked back to his truck, his movements mechanical. His hands left bloody prints on the door handle, on the steering wheel. The engine turned over with its familiar cough, and Noah pointed the vehicle toward Harborview Medical Center. As he drove through the dark streets, the locket burned like fire in his pocket, and in his mind, one question repeated over and over. If this woman has Sarah's locket, where the hell did she get it? The drive to Harborview took 20 minutes, though Noah barely registered the passage of time. His mind was a chaotic whirl of memories and impossibilities, each thought crashing into the next like waves against a rocky shore. He remembered the day he'd bought the locket, walking past the jewelry store window 3 times before gathering the courage to go inside. It had cost him 2 weeks' salary, money they really couldn't spare with a new baby at home, but he'd wanted to give Sarah something special, something that would tell her how much he loved her, even when he was too tired or too busy to say the words. He remembered her face when she opened the box on their anniversary, tears streaming down her cheeks as she laughed and called him a fool for spending so much. He remembered fastening the clasp around her neck, kissing the soft skin just below her ear, feeling her pulse flutter beneath his lips. He remembered identifying her body at the morgue, the sheet pulled back to reveal her bruised and broken face, and yes, the locket still around her neck. He remembered the funeral director asking if he wanted to keep it, and he'd said no. Let her be buried with it. Let her take into the ground this symbol of their love, this piece of him that would stay with her forever. So how was it now hanging around the neck of a stranger? The only explanations Noah could think of were impossible. Someone had robbed Sarah's grave, unthinkable, but technically possible. Someone had made an identical locket and somehow obtained a copy of the same photograph, possible, but why? Or Sarah had given the locket to someone before she died, had taken it off at some point, maybe that very day, and handed it to this woman for safekeeping. But that didn't make sense either. Sarah had never taken off the locket, not once in 3 years. She'd worn it in the shower, to bed, to work. She'd touched it absently when she was thinking, running her fingers over the smooth silver surface like a worry stone. Unless she'd known something was going to happen, unless she'd been scared or in danger, or... Noah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He was spinning theories without facts, building castles in the air. What he needed was information, and the only person who could give him that information was currently unconscious in the back of an ambulance. Harborview Medical Center rose up before him, a massive complex of buildings crowned with a helipad and bristling with satellite dishes and antennas. Noah had spent 7 years working in this place, had walked its hallways so many times he could navigate them blindfolded. He parked in the employee lot, using his old access card without thinking. It still worked. Apparently, no one had bothered to deactivate it when he'd left 2 years ago. The emergency department entrance was exactly as he remembered it. The automatic doors that never quite closed properly, the smell of antiseptic and coffee, the controlled chaos of nurses and doctors moving with purposeful urgency. Noah walked in and headed straight for the main desk, where a familiar face looked up at his approach. Noah Grant? Marissa Chen's eyes widened in surprise. She'd been a charge nurse when Noah worked here, and from the name tag she still was. Holy hell, is that you? What happened? Are you hurt? Noah looked down at himself and realized what a sight he must be, covered in soot and blood, clothes torn and singed, hair wild. I'm fine, he said. But they just brought in a woman from a taxi fire downtown. I need to know her condition. Marissa's professional mask slipped into place. Are you family? Noah hesitated. I'm the one who pulled her out. I'm the reason she's alive. That doesn't give you a legal right to her medical information, Noah. You know that. But Marissa was already typing on her computer, her eyes scanning the screen. What was her name? I don't know. The admission felt like a failure. Mid-20s to early 30s, dark hair, leather jacket, pulled from a burning taxi on Pike and 8th about 40 minutes ago. More typing. Then Marissa's expression shifted, became more guarded. She's in Trauma Bay 3. Critical but stable. That's all I can tell you. Marissa, please, this is important. Noah? She was wearing something that belonged to my wife, Noah said, his voice low and urgent. My dead wife. I need to know who she is and how she got it. Marissa stared at him for a long moment, reading something in his face that made her decision. Okay, look, I can't let you back there, but... She glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Her name is Elena Marlowe, that's all I know. They're running labs and imaging now. If you want to wait, I'll wait, Noah said. Thank you. He found a chair in the waiting area among the other worried faces and late-night emergencies. A mother holding a feverish toddler, an elderly man clutching his chest, a teenager with a skateboard and a badly swollen ankle. Noah sank into the uncomfortable plastic seat and put his head in his hands. Elena Marlowe. The name meant nothing to him. He pulled out his phone and typed it into a search engine, but the connection was spotty and the results were maddeningly vague. Several Elena Marlowes on social media, none of them seeming to match the woman he'd pulled from the taxi. A few professional profiles, but without photos, he couldn't confirm anything. He needed to talk to her, needed to look her in the eye and demand answers, needed to understand how his world had been turned inside out in the space of an hour. The minutes crawled by. Noah watched the clock on the wall tick through 1 hour, then 2. Around him, patients came and went. The teenager with the ankle hobbled out on crutches. The elderly man was taken back to a cardiac bay. The mother and her toddler disappeared through the double doors marked treatment area. Noah's phone buzzed again. Mrs. Chen, Lily fell back asleep. I'll stay the night, don't worry. But Noah was nothing but worry now. Worry about the woman in Trauma Bay 3, about the locket in his pocket, about the impossible questions that demanded answers. And deeper than all of that, a worry he'd been carrying for 3 years, a gnawing, persistent doubt that he'd never quite been able to silence. The accident that killed Sarah had never made sense to him. She'd been a cautious driver, careful to a fault. The police report said she'd been going 70 miles per hour in a 55 zone, but that wasn't like Sarah. Said she'd lost control on a curve she'd driven hundreds of times before. Said her blood alcohol level was .08, just barely over the legal limit, but Sarah rarely drank and never before driving. Noah had questioned all of it, had driven himself half mad going over the details, but in the end, what choice did he have but to accept it? People died in car accidents every day. Random chance. Wrong place, wrong time. The universe's cruelty on full display. But now? Now there was a woman named Elena Marlowe who'd spoken Sarah's name with her dying breath, who wore Sarah's locket, who seemed to know things she shouldn't know. And someone had tried to kill her by blowing up her taxi. What if Sarah's accident hadn't been an accident at all? The thought was like ice water in Noah's veins. He stood up abruptly, unable to sit still any longer, and paced the waiting area. A television mounted on the wall was tuned to a late-night news channel, the sound muted, closed captions running across the bottom of the screen. Noah barely registered the images. Political talking heads, weather forecasts, commercial breaks, until one segment made him stop mid-stride. The chyron read, "Developing story. Taxi explosion under investigation." The video showed the scene on Pike and 8th, the burning taxi, fire trucks, and police cars. Then it cut to a reporter standing in front of the charred wreckage, her breath visible in the cold night air. Noah turned up the volume, drawing annoyed looks from other waiting patients. "Preliminary reports suggest the explosion may not have been accidental," the reporter was saying. "Investigators on the scene have indicated that accelerant may have been used, raising questions about whether this was a targeted attack." The cab driver, identified as Martin Rodriguez, 47, was killed in the blast. One passenger, whose identity has not been released, was rescued by a bystander and is currently in critical condition at a local hospital. Police are asking anyone with information about this incident to contact the tip line at the number shown on your screen. The cab driver was dead. Noah hadn't even thought about the driver, hadn't seen him in the front seat, hadn't realized there was anyone else. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. Could he have saved both of them? Had he been so focused on the woman in the back seat that he'd missed someone else who needed help? But no, he'd looked in the front seat. He'd seen the crushed driver's door, the way the impact had folded the entire front end of the taxi like an accordion. If the driver had been in there, he'd already been dead when Noah arrived. There was nothing he could have done. Still, the knowledge sat heavy on Noah's conscience. A man was dead. A man named Martin Rodriguez, who probably had a family, friends, a life that had been cut short because someone had planted a bomb in his taxi. Because that's what this was, clearly. Not a gas leak or mechanical failure, a bomb. Meant for Elena Marlowe. Why? What could a freelance journalist have done to warrant murder? "Mr. Grant?" Noah spun around to find a doctor in scrubs standing behind him, her face tired but professional. Her name tag read Dr. Reeves. He didn't recognize her, but that wasn't surprising. 2 years was a long time, and Harborview cycled through residents and attendings constantly. "Yes," Noah said, his heart suddenly pounding. Is Elena?" "She's stable," Dr. Reeves said. "Remarkably so, considering what she went through. She has second-degree burns on approximately 12% of her body, moderate smoke inhalation, a concussion, and various contusions and lacerations. But no internal bleeding, no broken bones, no signs of organ damage. Honestly, Mr. Grant, if you hadn't pulled her out when you did, she'd be dead. You saved her life." The word should have brought relief, but Noah felt nothing except the driving need for answers. "Is she conscious? Can I talk to her?" Dr. Reeves hesitated. "She's drifting in and out. We've given her pain medication and she needs rest." "Are you family?" "No, but I need to eat." "Then I'm afraid I can't allow you to see her." Dr. Reeves's voice was kind but firm. "She's stable, Mr. Grant. That's all I can tell you." Now, I really think you should let someone examine you. You have some significant burns on your hands and arms that need treatment." Noah looked down at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. The skin was red and blistered, already starting to hurt now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "I'm fine," he said automatically. "You're not fine. You're in shock, and those burns are going to get infected if they're not treated." Dr. Reeves gestured to a nearby nurse. "Sarah, can you take Mr. Grant to minor treatment? Get those hands cleaned and bandaged." "Of course, doctor," the nurse said, approaching Noah with a sympathetic smile. Noah started to protest, but Dr. Reeves cut him off. "Mr. Grant, you did a heroic thing tonight. Don't diminish that by letting yourself get sick because you're too stubborn to accept help. Get your hands treated, go home, get some rest. If Ms. Marlowe's condition changes, we'll contact you." It wasn't really a question, and Noah was too exhausted to argue. He let the nurse lead him to a treatment bay where she carefully cleaned the burns on his hands and arms, applied antibiotic ointment, and wrapped them in sterile gauze. The pain, now that he was aware of it, was considerable, a deep, throbbing ache that radiated up to his elbows. "You're lucky," the nurse said as she worked. "These are mostly superficial. They'll hurt like hell for a few days, but they should heal without scarring if you keep them clean and dry." Lucky. Noah almost laughed at the word. He didn't feel lucky. He felt like he'd fallen through a crack in reality and landed in a world where nothing made sense anymore. The nurse gave him a prescription for pain medication and a list of care instructions, then sent him on his way. Noah walked back to the waiting area, intending to leave, but found himself stopping instead. He couldn't go home. Not yet. Not until he had answers. He found a bathroom and cleaned himself up as best he could, washing the soot from his face and hands, trying to make himself presentable. Then he made his way back to the main desk, where a different nurse was now on duty. "I need to leave a message for Elena Marlowe," he said. "The patient in Trauma Bay 3. The nurse, young, with kind eyes and purple scrubs, looked up at him. "I can't confirm we have a patient by that name, but I can take a message if you'd like to leave one." Noah grabbed a piece of paper and a pen from the desk and wrote quickly. "Ms. Marlowe, I'm the man who pulled you from the taxi. I need to talk to you about the locket. It's important. Please call me." He added his phone number and folded the paper in half. "Make sure she gets this," he said, pressing it into the nurse's hand. "It's urgent." "I'll do my best," the nurse promised. There was nothing else Noah could do here. He left the hospital, walked through the parking lot to his truck, and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at nothing. The locket was still in his pocket, its weight impossible to ignore. He took it out, opened it again, looked at the photograph of himself and baby Lily. Sarah had chosen this picture because it captured a moment of pure joy, the first day they'd brought their daughter home. Both of them exhausted and terrified and happier than they'd ever been. He remembered that day so vividly. The way Lily had fit perfectly in the crook of his arm, the smell of her, that indefinable newborn scent of milk and powder and new life. The overwhelming rush of love and protectiveness that had nearly brought him to his knees. And Sarah taking the photo, her laughter like music as Noah made silly faces to get the baby to smile. "Where did you go?" Noah whispered to the photograph. "What happened to you, Sarah? What aren't I seeing?" The photo, of course, gave no answers. Noah closed the locket and tucked it carefully back into his pocket. Then he started the truck and headed home, through streets that were now empty and quiet, the rain having stopped entirely. The city slept around him, unaware that in one man's heart, a dormant hope had begun to burn with terrible, impossible life. When he got home, Mrs. Chen met him at the door, her eyes widening at his disheveled appearance. "Noah, what happened?" "There was a fire," he said, which was true enough. "I'm fine. How's Lily?" "Sleeping soundly." Mrs. Chen studied his bandaged hands with concern. "Are you sure you're all right? Those look serious." "Just minor burns, really. I'm okay." Noah mustered a smile he didn't feel. "Thank you for staying with her. I don't know what I'd do without you." Mrs. Chen patted his arm gently. "That's what neighbors are for. Now get some sleep. You look like death warmed over." After she left, Noah checked on his daughter. Lily was sprawled across her bed in the boneless way of sleeping children, her dark hair fanned across the pillow, one arm wrapped around her favorite stuffed rabbit. She looked so much like Sarah it sometimes hurt to look at her. The same delicate features, the same stubborn chin, the same impossible beauty. Noah knelt beside the bed, careful not to wake her, and watched her breathe. This was what he'd been living for these past 3 years. This child. This miraculous gift that Sarah had given him. Everything he did, every breath he took, was for Lily. But what if Sarah was still out there somewhere? What if she hadn't died that night 3 years ago? What if she'd been taken or hidden or forced to disappear? What if she was alive, waiting for him to find her? The thought was too big, too impossible, too dangerous. It opened doors that Noah had spent 3 years learning to keep closed. Hope was the cruelest thing, the sharpest blade, and he'd bled himself dry on it in the months after Sarah's death. He couldn't do that again. Couldn't let himself believe in impossible things. But the locket was real. Elena Marlowe was real. The words she'd whispered, "Sarah said you'd come," were real. Noah kissed his daughter's forehead and stood up. He walked to his bedroom, stripped off his ruined clothes, and lay down on the bed without bothering to pull back the covers. His hands throbbed, his lungs hurt, every muscle in his body ached. He closed his eyes, knowing he wouldn't sleep, and waited for morning to come and bring with it whatever terrible truths were waiting to be revealed. In his pocket, pressed against his chest, the locket lay cold and heavy, a piece of the past that refused to stay buried. And somewhere in Harborview Medical Center, Elena Marlowe drifted in medicated dreams, holding secrets that would shatter a man's world, and maybe, just maybe, put it back together in a way he'd never dared to imagine. The night stretched on, dark and full of questions, and Noah Grant lay awake through all of it, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the woman he'd mourned for 3 years was somewhere out there, looking at the same dark sky, wondering if he would come for her. He would. God help him, he would. But first, he needed answers. Morning came with the kind of gray, hesitant light that made Seattle feel like it existed in perpetual twilight. Noah had finally fallen into a fitful sleep around 4 in the morning, his dreams plagued by fire and smoke, and a woman's face that shifted between Elena Marlowe and Sarah, until he couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. He woke at 6:30 to the sound of Lily padding into his room, her small hand shaking his shoulder. "Daddy, you're still wearing your clothes," she said, her voice full of that particular concern children have when they notice their parents doing something unusual. Noah sat up, wincing at the stiffness in his muscles and the immediate throb of pain in his bandaged hands. "Hey, sweetheart." "Yeah. I had a long night. How'd you sleep?" "Good. Mrs. Chen let me have 2 cookies before bed." Lily climbed onto the bed beside him, her eyes going wide as she noticed the bandages. "What happened to your hands?" "I had a little accident at work," Noah said, which was becoming his default explanation for everything. "Nothing serious. They'll be good as new in a few days." Lily reached out and gently touched one of the bandages, her small face scrunched with worry. "Does it hurt?" "A little. But you know what would make it feel better? If you made your old dad some of that terrible coffee you're always trying to sneak when you think I'm not looking." That got a giggle out of her, the sound like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I'm not allowed to use the coffee maker. You said so." "Well, today's a special exception. Go on, give it a try. And maybe see if we have any of those frozen waffles left." Lily bounded off the bed with the boundless energy of an almost 9-year-old, and Noah heard her thunder down the stairs toward the kitchen. He sat there for a moment, listening to the sounds of his daughter, attempting to operate appliances she wasn't quite tall enough to reach comfortably, and tried to convince himself that everything was normal, that yesterday hadn't happened, that he could just go about his day, take Lily to school, go to work, pretend his entire understanding of the last 3 years hadn't been called into question. But the locket was still in his pocket, and his phone was already buzzing with missed calls and messages. He picked it up, scrolling through them with his bandaged fingers. 3 calls from a number he didn't recognize. 2 text messages from the Seattle Police Department asking him to come in for a statement. 1 voicemail from Marissa at the hospital. He played the voicemail, holding the phone away from his face as Marissa's voice filled the quiet room. "Noah, it's Marissa. Listen, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but that woman you brought in last night, Elena Marlowe, she's awake and she's asking for you. She's pretty insistent about it, actually. If you're coming by, do it soon. The police are on their way to interview her, and after that, who knows when you'll get another chance. Noah's heart kicked into a higher gear. He was on his feet before he'd even consciously decided to move, his exhaustion forgotten. Elena Marlowe was awake. She was asking for him, which meant she remembered who he was, remembered what she'd said last night about Sarah. He went to the bathroom and splashed water on his face, then changed into clean clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt that he could manage despite his bandaged hands. In the kitchen, he found Lily standing on a chair, pouring water into the coffee maker with intense concentration. The counter was covered in coffee grounds, and the smell of burnt waffle drifted from the toaster. "That looks great, sweetheart," Noah said, kissing the top of her head. "Listen, something came up and I need to go out for a little bit. Can you call Mrs. Chen and see if she can come watch you until it's time for school?" Lily's face fell. "But it's Saturday, Daddy." Saturday. Of course it was Saturday. Noah had lost track of the days entirely. "Right, Saturday. Well, you're still going to need Mrs. Chen for a bit. I promise I won't be long." "Is it about work?" Lily asked, and there was something in her voice, a guardedness, a wariness that broke Noah's heart. This was what he'd done to her. 3 years of being a single parent, 3 years of juggling jobs and bills, and the constant weight of grief had taught his daughter not to expect too much from him, had taught her that work always came first, that promises of "I won't be long" usually meant hours. "It's important," he said, crouching down so he was at her eye level. "Really important. And when I get back, how about we do something fun? We could go to that bookstore you like, get lunch at that pizza place. Make a day of it. Promise?" Lily's dark eyes, Sarah's eyes, searched his face. "Promise," Noah said, and meant it. He waited until Mrs. Chen arrived, apologizing profusely for the early morning call and the imposition. She waved away his concerns with the easy grace of someone who'd become more family than neighbor over the past 3 years. Then he was in his truck, pulling out of the driveway, his mind already racing ahead to the hospital and the woman who held answers to questions he'd been afraid to ask. The morning traffic was lighter than usual, most of Seattle still sleeping off Friday night. Noah made it to Harborview in 20 minutes, parking in the same spot he'd used the night before. His access card still worked, still got him through the employee entrance without question. He wondered if anyone had noticed his unofficial return, or if in the chaos of a busy metropolitan hospital, one more person in civilian clothes was just background noise. The emergency department was in that strange lull that came between the late-night traumas and the mid-morning rush. Noah walked past the main desk, keeping his head down, and headed for the trauma bays. He knew this layout like the back of his hand, knew which hallways had cameras and which were blind spots, knew where the nurse's station was positioned and which doors required keycard access. Trauma Bay 3 was on the second floor, accessible by a stairwell that hospital staff used to avoid the crowded elevators. Noah took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the protest from his aching legs, and pushed through the door onto the second-floor hallway. A quick glance told him the nurse's station was currently unmanned, probably shift change, the 30-minute window when everyone was either getting reports or giving them. He found Trauma Bay 3, its door partially open. Noah paused outside, listening for voices, but heard nothing except the steady beep of monitoring equipment. He pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. Elena Marlowe was sitting up in the hospital bed, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, an oxygen cannula in her nose. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut, and bandages covered her arms where the burns had been treated. But she was alert, her good eye fixing on Noah the moment he entered. "You came," she said, and her voice was rough from smoke damage but steady. "I wasn't sure you would." Noah closed the door behind him and approached the bed slowly, as if she were a wild animal that might bolt. "You asked for me. You knew my name. You're wearing my dead wife's locket." He kept his voice low, aware that the hospital walls were thin and nurses could appear at any moment. "So yeah, I came. And I want answers. All of them. Starting with who the hell you are." Elena studied him for a long moment, and Noah had the unsettling sensation of being assessed, measured, judged. Then she nodded slightly, as if he'd passed some internal test. "My name is Elena Marlowe. I'm a freelance investigative journalist based out of Portland. For the past 8 months, I've been investigating an insurance fraud ring that operates across the Pacific Northwest. They stage fatal accidents, use doubles or misidentified bodies, collect the insurance payouts, and the victims disappear with new identities. She paused, grimacing as if the effort of speaking hurt. Your wife, Sarah Grant, was their first success story. She didn't die in that car crash, Mr. Grant. She survived, and I helped her disappear. The words hit Noah like a physical blow. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself, his vision swimming. That's impossible. I identified her body. I saw her at the morgue. I buried her. You buried someone, Elena said quietly. But it wasn't Sarah. The woman in that morgue had similar height, similar build, similar hair color. Her face was badly damaged in the crash. You said so yourself in the accident report I read. Dental records were falsified. DNA testing was never done because there was no reason to suspect the body wasn't who they said it was. The funeral home got a body that matched the description, and you got a closed casket because the damage was too severe for viewing. Noah's legs gave out. He sank into the chair, his mind refusing to process what Elena was telling him. Why? Why would Sarah do that? Why would she let me think she was dead? Let our daughter think... His voice broke. Lily was 6 years old. 6 years old, and she lost her mother. You're telling me that was all a lie? That Sarah chose to leave us? She didn't have a choice, Elena said, and there was genuine pain in her voice. Mr. Grant, Noah, can I call you Noah? He nodded numbly. Noah, Sarah discovered something she wasn't supposed to. She was working as a paramedic, same as you, and she responded to a car accident on Highway 2. Single vehicle collision, driver killed instantly. Except when Sarah was processing the scene, she noticed something wrong with the body. The driver's license said Michael Chen, 42 years old, but the body was wrong. The tattoos didn't match. The surgical scars were on the wrong side. She took photos, made notes, flagged it for investigation. Elena shifted in the bed, wincing at the movement. What Sarah didn't know was that Michael Chen was part of a larger operation. He'd paid to disappear, faked his death to escape gambling debts and a nasty divorce. The organization that arranged it didn't take kindly to a curious paramedic threatening to expose them. They gave Sarah a choice: become part of the system or become its next victim. She chose to live, chose to run, chose to fake her own death so that you and Lily would be safe from the people who would have used you to get to her. Noah shook his head, unable to accept it. Sarah would have told me. We didn't keep secrets. We were partners. She would have come to me and we would have figured it out together. Would you have let her fake her death? Elena asked. If she'd come to you and said, I'm in danger, and the only way to keep you and Lily safe is to disappear, to let you believe I'm dead for years, maybe forever, would you have agreed to that? The answer was immediate. No, never. I would have found another way. I would have protected her. That's what she knew you'd say. And that's exactly why she couldn't tell you. Elena's good eye held his gaze. Noah, these people don't make empty threats. They have connections in law enforcement, in medical facilities, in government agencies. They stage accidents that are so convincing, so thoroughly documented, that no one questions them. If Sarah had stayed, if she'd tried to fight them openly, they would have killed her for real. And then they would have made sure you didn't ask too many questions. Do you understand what I'm saying? Noah understood. He just didn't want to. Didn't want to believe that for 3 years he'd been mourning a woman who was alive. Didn't want to accept that every tear he'd cried, every night he'd spent staring at her empty pillow, every time he'd had to explain to Lily why Mommy wasn't coming home, all of it had been based on a lie. Where is she? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. If she's alive, where is she now? Elena's expression shifted to something that might have been pity. I don't know. That was the point. After the staged accident, after I helped her create a new identity, she disappeared completely. No contact, no trail, nothing that could lead the organization back to her or to you. The less I knew, the less anyone knew, the safer everyone was. But you have the locket. She gave you the locket. Noah pulled it from his pocket, held it up so Elena could see it. She wouldn't have given this away unless she trusted you completely, unless she wanted you to be able to find her if necessary. Elena's eye widened slightly at the sight of the locket. She gave that to me the night before the accident. Said if anything went wrong, if she didn't make it out, I should find you and tell you the truth. Not right away. She made me promise to wait at least 3 years until she was sure the organization had moved on and wasn't watching you anymore. She said you deserved to know that she loved you, that leaving wasn't her choice, that every day away from you and Lily was torture. Tears burned in Noah's eyes. He blinked them back furiously, unwilling to break down in front of this stranger who was systematically destroying and rebuilding his entire world. So why now? Why last night, if you were supposed to wait 3 years? Because they found me, Elena said. I've been investigating the organization for months, getting close, gathering evidence. I was about to publish an expose that would blow the whole thing wide open. They couldn't let that happen. The taxi explosion was meant to kill me and destroy all my research. She gestured to the bandages on her arms. Obviously they failed, thanks to you. The cab driver didn't fail. He's dead. Martin Rodriguez, I know. He wasn't part of it. Just wrong place, wrong time. They planted the device in his cab, probably while it was parked, timed to go off during my ride. Elena's voice hardened. Add him to the list of people this organization has murdered to protect their profits. Noah stood up and paced to the window, staring out at the Seattle skyline without really seeing it. His mind was spinning, trying to fit together pieces of a puzzle that kept changing shape. You said Sarah was their first success story. How many others have there been? At least 40 that I've been able to document. Probably more that I haven't found yet. It's a lucrative business. Life insurance policies worth millions, death benefits, pension payouts, debt forgiveness. The deceased pay a percentage to the organization, get a new identity, and start over somewhere else. And the organization makes a fortune while leaving behind grieving families who never know the truth. Families like mine, Noah said bitterly. Families like my daughter, who had to grow up without a mother because her mother chose money over. It wasn't about money, Elena interrupted sharply. Sarah didn't pay them anything. She didn't want to disappear. They forced her to, and when they did, she made sure you and Lily were protected. Every month for the past 3 years, an anonymous payment has gone into a trust fund in Lily's name. $25,000, Noah. That's $750,000 sitting in an account waiting for your daughter when she turns 18. Where do you think that money came from? Noah turned from the window, staring at Elena. What are you talking about? There's no trust fund. There is. Sarah set it up through offshore accounts, routed through so many shell companies that it's untraceable. She couldn't send the money directly to you. That would have been too obvious, too easy to track. But she made sure Lily would be taken care of. Made sure that even if she could never come back, her daughter would have something. Elena's voice softened. Sarah loved you both more than anything. Leaving you destroyed her, but staying would have killed her, and possibly you too. Noah's hands were shaking. He looked down at the locket, at the photo of himself and baby Lily, and felt something crack open inside his chest. All this time he'd thought Sarah had abandoned them, had died because of careless driving or bad luck or the random cruelty of the universe. But she'd been alive, suffering, alone, protecting them the only way she knew how. How do I find her? He asked. You helped her disappear. You must have some idea where she went. Elena shook her head. I told you, I don't know. It was safer that way, but... She hesitated, as if weighing whether to continue. Before she left, Sarah said something. She was looking at a map, tracing a route along the northern coast. She mentioned Port Angeles, said something about always wanting to see the Olympic Peninsula, about how it would be a good place to disappear into the mountains and the rain. It might have meant nothing, or it might have been a breadcrumb in case someday you came looking. Port Angeles, a small city on the northern tip of the Olympic Peninsula, gateway to Olympic National Park and the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Noah had been there once, years ago, on a camping trip before Lily was born. He remembered dense forests and rugged coastline, isolated towns and miles of wilderness. A good place to disappear, indeed. The evidence you gathered, Noah said. The expose you were going to publish. Do you still have it? Most of it was in the taxi, my laptop, my files, years of investigation work, all gone. But I'm not stupid. I keep backups, cloud storage, encrypted drives, hard copies, and safe deposit boxes. The organization thinks they destroyed my research, but they only destroyed one copy. Elena's jaw set with determination. I'm still going to publish. I'm still going to expose what they did to Sarah and Martin and all the others. But now I need to stay alive long enough to do it. They'll come for you again, Noah said. It wasn't a question. Probably, which is why I need to get out of here as soon as possible. The police are going to want statements, ask questions I can't answer without revealing too much. And if the organization has people in law enforcement, which I'm certain they do, then staying in this hospital is like painting a target on my back. Noah thought about that, thought about the consequences of what Elena was suggesting. You're talking about checking yourself out against medical advice, going on the run while you're still injured and recovering. I'm talking about survival. I've done it before. I'll do it again. You nearly died last night. You have burns, smoke inhalation, a concussion. You can barely sit up without grimacing. Noah crossed his arms. You're not going anywhere alone. Elena raised an eyebrow. I don't recall asking for your help. You asked for me specifically. You knew I'd come. Which means some part of you knew you'd need more than just information. Noah met her gaze steadily. Sarah trusted you enough to give you that locket, so I'm going to trust you enough to help you stay alive. And in return, you're going to help me find my wife. For a long moment, Elena just looked at him, that same assessing expression she'd worn when he first entered the room. Then, slowly she nodded. Okay, but we do this my way. These people are dangerous, Noah. More dangerous than you can imagine. If we're going after them, if we're trying to find Sarah, we have to be smart. Careful. One wrong move and we're both dead. I spent 7 years as a paramedic. I've seen plenty of dangerous situations. I can handle myself. With all due respect, treating car accident victims is different from taking on an organized criminal enterprise. Elena shifted in the bed, her face tight with pain. But you did pull me out of a burning taxi, so maybe you're tougher than you look. When can you be ready to leave? Leave? We can't just walk out of here. You're still admitted. There are police coming to interview you. There are protocols. Protocols that will keep me in one place long enough for the organization to send someone to finish the job, Elena said. I checked myself in under my real name because I wasn't conscious enough to lie. Which means they know exactly where I am right now. We need to move, Noah. Soon. As if summoned by her words, voices echoed in the hallway outside. Noah recognized the cadence of police radio chatter, the heavy footfalls of multiple people approaching. He moved to the door, cracking it open just enough to peer out. 2 Seattle police officers were walking down the hallway, accompanied by a man in a suit who had "Detective" written all over him. They were heading directly for Trauma Bay 3, and they'd be here in seconds. Noah turned back to Elena. Police are here. What do you want to do? Elena's good eye gleamed with something that might have been excitement or fear or both. Help me up. There's a service elevator at the end of this hallway that goes down to the loading dock. If we move fast, we can be gone before they finish knocking. You can't even walk. Then I guess you'll have to carry me. Elena was already pulling the IV line from her arm, her face white with pain but her hands steady. Come on, Noah. Time to decide. Do you want answers, or do you want to spend the next hour explaining to the police why you're visiting a bombing victim you claim not to know? She had a point. Noah crossed to the bed and helped Elena swing her legs over the side. She gasped as her feet hit the floor, her balance wavering, and Noah caught her before she could fall. She was lighter than he'd expected, her frame delicate beneath the hospital gown. There's a bag in the closet, Elena said through gritted teeth. My clothes, my phone, my wallet. Grab it. Noah retrieved the bag one-handed while supporting Elena with his other arm. The clothes inside were torn and stained with blood, but Elena's phone and wallet were intact. He handed her the bag, and she clutched it against her chest like a lifeline. The voices in the hallway were closer now, just outside the door. Noah could hear the detective saying something about witness statements and ongoing investigation. They had maybe 10 seconds before someone knocked. Service elevator, Noah said. Let's go. He half-carried, half-dragged Elena out of the trauma bay through a side door that led to a connecting hallway. This was the route staff used to move equipment and supplies without clogging the main corridors, and at this hour it was mercifully empty. Elena's breathing was labored, each step clearly costing her, but she didn't complain. Noah had to admire that. Whatever else she was tough. They made it to the service elevator just as Noah heard someone call out behind them. He jabbed the down button, praying the elevator was close, praying they had enough time. The doors opened with a cheerful ding that sounded obscenely loud in the quiet hallway. Noah practically threw Elena inside, then followed, hitting the button for the basement level. The doors started to close just as a police officer rounded the corner and spotted them. "Hey, stop!" But the doors were already shut, the elevator descending. Noah leaned against the wall, his heart hammering. That was subtle. "Subtlety is overrated," Elena said. She was leaning heavily against the elevator railing, her face pale and sweating. "Loading dock opens onto an alley behind the hospital. If we can get to the street, we can lose them in morning traffic." The elevator reached the basement with a gentle lurch. The doors opened onto a dimly lit loading area filled with pallets of supplies and empty gurneys. Noah spotted the exit, a heavy door marked with an alarm warning that Noah knew from experience hadn't worked in years. They made it outside into a narrow alley that smelled of garbage and exhaust fumes. The morning air was cold against Noah's face, carrying the threat of more rain. His truck was parked 3 blocks away in the employee lot, but there was no way Elena could walk that far in her condition. "Stay here," Noah said, propping Elena against the wall. "I'll get my truck and come back for you." "No!" Elena's hand shot out and grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "We stay together. If they find me alone, I'm as good as dead. Help me walk. We'll figure it out." So Noah put his arm around Elena's waist and let her lean her weight against him, and together they shuffled out of the alley and onto the street. A few early morning joggers passed them, giving them curious looks but not stopping. To anyone watching, they probably looked like a man helping his drunk girlfriend home after a rough night. They made it half a block before Noah heard sirens. Police cars were pulling up to the hospital's main entrance, lights flashing. In minutes, they'd have officers searching the area, checking security footage, tracking their escape route. "My truck's 2 more blocks," Noah said. "Can you make it?" "Do I have a choice?" Elena's breathing was ragged, but she kept moving. "What kind of truck?" "Blue Ford F-150. Why?" "Just trying to picture our getaway vehicle. Somehow I doubt it's as exciting as the movies make it seem." Noah almost laughed. Here they were, fleeing from police and potentially assassins, and Elena was making jokes. Maybe that was how you survived in her line of work, humor as armor against the horror. They reached the employee parking lot without being stopped. Noah's truck sat exactly where he'd left it, looking worn and ordinary and absolutely beautiful. He got Elena into this passenger seat, strapping the seatbelt around her carefully, then ran around to the driver's side. The engine turned over with its familiar rumble. Noah backed out of the spot and headed for the exit, forcing himself to drive at a normal speed, to not attract attention. In the rearview mirror, he could see police officers spreading out from the hospital, searching the perimeter. "We made it," Elena said softly. "I didn't actually think we would." "Where do we go now?" Noah asked, turning onto the main road and blending into the sparse morning traffic. Elena was quiet for a moment, her head leaning against the window. When she spoke, her voice was tired but determined. "I have a safe house. An apartment in Belltown under a fake name. It's not much, but it has my backup files, clean clothes, and most importantly, no connection to my real identity. We can regroup there, figure out our next move." Noah nodded, making a mental note of the direction as Elena gave him street-by-street instructions. His mind was still reeling from everything he'd learned in the past hour. Sarah was alive. His wife, the woman he'd mourned for 3 years, was out there somewhere. And sitting next to him was a journalist who'd helped fake Sarah's death and was now the target of the same organization that had taken his wife away from him. "I need to call my daughter," Noah said as they stopped at a red light. "She's with a neighbor, but I can't just disappear without telling her something." "No calls yet, not until we know we're secure. These people have resources, connections. If they're monitoring you, and there's a good chance they are, a phone call could lead them right to us." Noah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The thought of Lily waiting for him, wondering where he was, made his chest ache. But Elena was right. If there was even a chance that someone was watching him, listening to his calls, he couldn't risk it. "Later," he said. "Once we're at the safe house, I'll figure something out." They drove in silence for a few minutes, the city waking up around them. Coffee shops opening their doors, buses pulling away from stops. the daily rhythm of urban life continuing oblivious to the small drama unfolding in a battered blue truck. "Tell me about Lily," Elena said suddenly. "Sarah talked about her all the time, but it's been 3 years. She must have changed." Noah glanced over, surprised by the request. "She's 8 years old, almost 9, smart as hell, stubborn as hell, looks exactly like her mother." His voice softened. "She doesn't remember Sarah very well anymore. Mostly just impressions, feelings. Sometimes she asks me questions about her mom, and I have to decide which memories to share. Which ones will hurt less. It's the worst part of being a parent, knowing you're the only thing standing between your kid and the truth is so much worse than anything you could make up." "She'll get to meet her mother again," Elena said quietly. "If we find Sarah. If we can keep everyone alive long enough." "That's a lot of ifs." "Welcome to my world." Elena shifted in her seat, grimacing. "Take the next left. The building is 3 blocks down. Red brick, fire escape on the side. Park around back if you can." Noah followed her directions, pulling into a narrow alley behind a 4-story apartment building that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the windows were barred, and graffiti covered the lower level like urban camouflage. It was exactly the kind of place where no one asked questions and everyone minded their own business. He helped Elena out of the truck and up a set of rusty fire escape stairs to a 3rd-floor window. She produced a key from the bag, unlocked the window, and they climbed inside. The apartment was small, a studio with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and barely enough room for a bed and desk. But it was clean and surprisingly well organized. Cardboard boxes lined one wall, labeled with dates and case numbers. A corkboard hung above the desk, covered in photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes connected by red string like something out of a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Elena collapsed onto the bed with a sigh of relief. "Home sweet temporary home. There's coffee in the kitchen if you want to make some. I need to check my files, make sure everything's still accessible." Noah moved to the corkboard while Elena powered on a laptop that had been hidden under the bed. Up close, he could see the photographs more clearly. Crime scenes, accident sites, men and women in business suits and casual clothes, their faces circled in red marker. And in the center of it all, a photograph that made Noah's breath catch. It was Sarah. His Sarah. Taken from a distance with a telephoto lens showing her sitting at an outdoor cafe table, sunglasses hiding her eyes, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was smiling at something beyond the camera's frame, and she looked happy. She looked alive. "When was this taken?" Noah asked, his voice rough. Elena looked up from the laptop. 2 months ago, Port Angeles, like I thought. She was using the name Claire Morrison, working at a women's shelter. I've been watching her from a distance, making sure she was safe, making sure the organization hadn't found her." She hesitated. "I wasn't supposed to keep tabs on her. Sarah made me promise that once she disappeared, I'd let her stay disappeared. But I couldn't help myself. I needed to know she made it, that she was okay." Noah reached out and carefully unpinned the photograph from the corkboard. His hand was shaking. Sarah. Alive. Real. Not a ghost. Not a memory. But a living, breathing person existing somewhere in the world. 2 months ago, he whispered. 2 months ago, she was right there, 100 miles away, and I didn't know. She didn't want you to know. That was the whole point. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. The organization moves on once they think a case is closed. 3 years was supposed to be enough time for them to forget about Sarah Grant, to assume she was really dead and not worth thinking about anymore. If you'd tried to find her before now, if there'd been any indication you didn't believe the official story, they would have known, and they would have silenced her for real. But now, Noah looked at Elena. Now that you're exposing them, now that they know you have information about their operation, what does that mean for Sarah? It means we're running out of time, Elena said grimly. She turned the laptop so Noah could see the screen. It showed a document filled with names, dates, locations, and financial transactions. This is the evidence I've been gathering. Names of organization members, details of staged deaths, money trails leading back to the people at the top. Once I publish this, the entire operation collapses. But before I do that, we need to warn Sarah. Because when these people realize their empire is about to fall, they're going to try to eliminate anyone who can testify against them. How long do we have? My editor expects the story by Monday. That gives us 48 hours to get to Port Angeles, find Sarah, and convince her to go into hiding until the authorities can move in and make arrests. Elena closed the laptop. It's not a lot of time. And convince her to go into hiding until the authorities can move in and make arrests. Elena closed the laptop. It's not a lot of time. Then we need to leave soon. Today. Noah looked around the apartment. Do you have a car? Something that's not registered to you? There's a Honda in a parking garage 2 blocks from here. Registered to one of my aliases, paid for in cash. But I'm not going anywhere until I've had some rest and medical attention. These burns need proper care, and I can barely stand without help. We push too hard too fast, and I'll be useless. She was right, of course. Noah could see the exhaustion in her face, the way she was holding herself carefully to avoid aggravating her injuries. And he couldn't exactly leave her here alone while he went after Sarah himself. He needed Elena, needed her knowledge of the organization, her investigative skills, her connection to whatever life Sarah had built in Port Angeles. Okay, Noah said, we rest, but only for a few hours. Then we leave, whether you're ready or not. Deal. Elena lay back on the bed, closing her eyes. There's a medical kit under the sink. If you want to be useful, you can help me change these bandages and apply fresh antibiotic ointment. And then maybe you can tell me more about what you're planning to tell your daughter about where you've been. Noah found the medical kit, a professional-grade affair that reminded him of his paramedic days. He helped Elena unwrap the burns on her arms, cleaning them gently and applying fresh dressings while she gritted her teeth and tried not to make sounds of pain. The burns were second degree, painful, but not life-threatening if properly cared for. As he worked, he thought about Lily, about what he would tell her when he called, about how you explained to an 8-year-old that everything she'd believed about her mother might be wrong, that hope wasn't always a foolish thing, that sometimes impossible wishes came true in the worst possible ways. He would tell her something. He would make her understand. But first, he had to survive the next 48 hours, had to find Sarah, had to protect Elena long enough to bring down the organization that had torn his family apart. Noah finished bandaging Elena's arms and sat back, looking at this stranger who'd become his unlikely ally. Thank you, he said, for helping Sarah, for keeping her secret, for coming to find me now. Elena opened her eyes and looked at him with that same assessing gaze. Don't thank me yet. We're just getting started, and before this is over, you're going to wish you'd never pulled me out of that taxi. Maybe, Noah said, but I did, and now we're in this together. Together, Elena echoed, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. It was a tired, pained smile, but it was genuine. Okay, Noah Grant, let's go find your wife. Outside the window, Seattle continued its morning routine, unaware that in a small apartment in Belltown, 2 people were planning to tear apart an organization that had operated in shadows for years. Unaware that a man was about to reclaim the life that had been stolen from him, or die trying. The Locket sat on the desk beside Elena's laptop, catching the gray morning light, holding within it the promise of a family reunited and the threat of dangers yet to come. And in Port Angeles, a woman named Claire Morrison, who used to be Sarah Grant, went about her day, not knowing that the husband she'd left behind was coming for her at last. Noah watched Elena sleep for a while, her breathing finally evening out into something that resembled peace. The morning light filtering through the dusty window cast shadows across her bruised face, and he found himself thinking about how quickly his life had tilted off its axis. 24 hours ago, he'd been a single dad working late shifts and counting pennies. Now he was harboring a fugitive journalist in a safe house while planning to track down a wife who was supposed to be dead. He moved to the window, careful to stand to the side where he couldn't be seen from the street below. The alley was empty except for a stray cat picking through an overturned trash can. Normal. Everything looked so goddamn normal, while his entire world was being rebuilt from the ground up. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and Noah pulled it out to see 3 missed calls from Mrs. Chen and 2 text messages. The first read, "Lily is getting worried. Where are you?" The second, sent 10 minutes later, "She wants to know if you're coming home for lunch." Noah's finger hovered over the reply button, but Elena's warning echoed in his mind. If they were being monitored, any communication could give away their location. But he couldn't just disappear without a word. Lily had already lost one parent. He wouldn't let her think she was losing another. He typed carefully. Something important came up. We'll explain everything soon. Tell Lily I love her and I'll be home as fast as I can. Can you stay with her until tomorrow? We'll pay you double. The response came almost immediately. Of course. But Noah, is everything okay? Should I be worried? Everything's fine, he lied. Just need to handle some personal business. Keep doors locked. Don't answer for anyone you don't know. There was a long pause before Mrs. Chen replied. Now I'm worried. Don't be. Just being careful. Thank you for watching her. Noah turned off his phone completely, removing the battery the way he'd seen people do in movies. He wasn't sure if it actually prevented tracking, but it made him feel like he was taking some kind of precaution. The phone went into a drawer, and he tried not to think about how cut off he now was from his daughter. Elena stirred on the bed, her eyes opening slowly. You should sleep too, she said, her voice hoarse. We'll need to leave in a few hours, and you look like you're running on fumes. I can't sleep. Noah moved away from the window and sat in the desk chair, studying the corkboard again. Tell me more about the organization. How did you even find out about them? Elena pushed herself up to sitting, wincing at the movement. I was investigating a different story. Maritime insurance fraud in the Portland area. I kept finding these cases where boats would sink under suspicious circumstances. Crew members would die, and families would collect massive insurance payouts. But something was off. The bodies were often too damaged to identify properly. Dental records would match, but other details wouldn't, and the investigations would close remarkably fast. She reached for a water bottle on the nightstand, taking a long drink before continuing. I started digging deeper, found connections between the maritime cases and car accidents, house fires, even a few plane crashes. Different types of incidents, different locations, but the same pattern. Deaths that were too convenient, investigations that wrapped up too quickly, insurance companies that paid out without much question. And underneath it all, a network of people facilitating the disappearances. How many people are we talking about? Noah asked. Is this like organized crime, the mafia? More sophisticated than that. The organization operates like a legitimate business. They have lawyers, accountants, medical professionals, law enforcement contacts, even people in the insurance industry itself. Think of it as a service provider for people who need to disappear and have the money to pay for it. Some clients are running from debts, some from criminal charges, some from dangerous personal situations. The organization charges anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million depending on how complex the disappearance needs to be. Noah's mind reeled at the numbers. Sarah didn't have that kind of money. We were living paycheck to paycheck with a new baby. Sarah wasn't a client. She was a loose end. Elena's expression darkened. When she discovered the truth about that accident on Highway 2, the organization saw her as a threat. They gave her a choice: disappear using their services or be disappeared permanently. Sarah chose to live. In exchange for her silence and cooperation, they faked her death for free and created a new identity for her. But there were conditions. What conditions? No contact with her old life. Ever. Complete separation from you and Lily. They told her that if she ever tried to reach out, if she gave any indication she was alive, they'd come after you both. Make it look like accidents, of course. They're good at that. Elena's voice was bitter. Sarah's been living in a cage for 3 years, Noah. A cage of fear and isolation, knowing that the only way to keep her family safe was to let you believe she was dead. The rage that had been building in Noah's chest since last night finally found focus. This organization, these faceless people who played God with families and lives, had stolen 3 years from him. 3 years of mourning, 3 years of Lily growing up without her mother, 3 years of Sarah living alone with her grief and fear. The name's on your board, Noah said, pointing to the photographs. Are those the people running the organization? Some of them. The man in the center, that's Marcus Voss. He's the architect of the whole operation. Former insurance investigator who got tired of catching fraud and decided it was more profitable to facilitate it. He's careful, insulated by layers of associates and shell companies, but he's the one calling the shots. Elena stood up slowly, moving to the corkboard. The woman next to him is Diana Reeves. She handles the medical side, falsifying death certificates, bribing coroners, making sure bodies are cremated before anyone can ask too many questions. And this guy, she pointed to a heavy-set man with cold eyes, is Thomas Chen. No relation to your neighbor, different spelling. He's enforcement. When clients don't follow the rules or someone threatens to expose the operation, Thomas handles it personally. He's the one who planted the bomb in your taxi. Most likely. Or he hired someone to do it. Thomas doesn't like to get his hands dirty unless necessary, but he's very good at making people disappear for real. Elena traced a finger along the red string connecting various photographs. The organization has people everywhere. Police, fire departments, hospitals, government agencies. That's how they've stayed hidden for so long. Any investigation that gets too close gets redirected or shut down by someone on the inside. Noah studied the faces on the board, committing them to memory. These were the people who'd destroyed his family. These were the people who'd forced Sarah to choose between her safety and her life with him and Lily. And if Elena's timeline was correct, these were the people who would soon realize their empire was crumbling and would do anything to protect themselves. Your exposé, Noah said. When you publish it, what happens to everyone involved? The clients who paid to disappear, people like Sarah who were forced into it. That's complicated. Legally, the clients committed fraud. They'll likely face charges, asset seizure, possible jail time depending on what they were running from. But people like Sarah who were coerced, they'll have to prove they were under duress. With my testimony and documentation, I think we can make that case. But it won't be easy, and there's no guarantee the legal system will see it the way we do. So even if we find Sarah, even if we bring down the organization, she might still go to prison? It's possible, Elena admitted. But the alternative is leaving her in hiding forever, looking over her shoulder, never able to come home. At least this way, she has a chance at a real life again, a chance to see Lily grow up, a chance to be Sarah Grant instead of Claire Morrison. Noah stood and paced the small apartment, his mind working through the implications. If they exposed the organization, Sarah would have to come forward, would have to testify, relive the trauma, face potential criminal charges. And Lily would have to learn that her mother had been alive all this time, that she'd been abandoned, even if it was for good reasons. The psychological impact of that revelation could devastate his daughter. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was letting Sarah stay buried under a false identity, letting the organization continue destroying families, letting people like Thomas Chen operate with impunity. We do this right, Noah said finally. We find Sarah, we get her somewhere safe, and we make sure the evidence you have is bulletproof before anything goes public. I'm not letting these people hurt my family again. Agreed. Elena moved to the laptop and opened several encrypted files. I've been building this case for 8 months. Financial records showing money transfers between organization members, recorded phone conversations, testimony from former clients who left the organization's protection and are willing to talk, autopsy reports that don't match the supposed victims. It's comprehensive, but I need one more piece. What piece? Marcus Voss's personal records. He keeps a ledger, old-school paper files, documenting every client and every transaction. It's insurance for him. If anyone in the organization turns on him, he can expose them all. The ledger is hidden somewhere, probably in his home or a private safe deposit box. If I can get my hands on it, the case becomes airtight. Noah raised an eyebrow. You're talking about breaking into a crime boss's house? I'm talking about doing whatever it takes to end this. Elena's good eye blazed with determination. These people killed Martin Rodriguez. They nearly killed me. They've terrorized Sarah for 3 years and destroyed countless other families. I'm not stopping until they're behind bars. Before Noah could respond, a sound from the alley below made him freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. He moved to the window and peered down carefully. A man in a dark jacket was walking through the alley, stopping occasionally to look at the buildings on either side. His posture was alert, professional. Not a random pedestrian. We have company, Noah said quietly. Elena was beside him instantly, looking down at the man in the alley. Her face went pale. That's Thomas Chen. Noah's blood ran cold. How did he find us? I don't know. Maybe they tracked my phone. Maybe they have people watching every hospital exit. Maybe... Elena grabbed Noah's arm. It doesn't matter. We need to leave now. There's only one exit. The fire escape goes down to that alley. Then we go up. Elena was already moving, gathering her laptop and stuffing it into a backpack. The roof connects to the next building. If we can get across, we can use their fire escape to reach the street on the other side. Noah helped her pack the essentials: the laptop, the backup drives, her phone, her wallet. Elena grabbed a gun from under the mattress, checking the magazine with practiced efficiency. Noah stared at the weapon. "You didn't mention you had a gun." "You didn't ask." Elena tucked it into the waistband of her jeans, covered by her jacket. "Can you handle a weapon if necessary?" "I was a paramedic, not a soldier." "That's not an answer." "I've shot rifles before, hunting with my dad when I was younger, but handguns, combat situations, no, I can't handle that." "Then stay behind me and do exactly what I say." Elena moved to the window, opening it as quietly as possible. "And pray we don't have to find out if Thomas brought backup." They climbed onto the fire escape, Noah going first to help Elena navigate with her injuries. The metal was slick with morning moisture, and every step seemed to echo too loudly in the narrow space between buildings. Above them, the roof was 2 stories up. Below them, Thomas Chen was entering the building through the back door. Noah climbed as fast as he dared, his bandaged hands making every grip awkward and painful. Behind him, Elena struggled to keep pace, her burned arms and legs protesting every movement. They were halfway to the roof when they heard a crash from inside the apartment. Thomas had reached the 3rd floor and wasn't bothering with subtlety. "Faster!" Elena hissed. They reached the roof just as they heard the window being forced open below. Noah pulled Elena up the last few feet, and they ran across the flat rooftop toward the neighboring building. The gap between structures was maybe 4 feet, nothing that would have worried Noah under normal circumstances. But with Elena injured and both of them exhausted, 4 feet looked like a canyon. "I'll go first," Noah said. "Then catch you if you need help." He backed up, took a running start, and jumped. His feet hit the opposite roof with a jarring impact that sent pain shooting through his legs, but he stayed upright. He turned back to Elena, who was staring at the gap with visible fear. "I can't make that," she said. "Yes, you can. Just run and jump. I'll catch you." "My legs. The burns." "Elena, he's coming. You jump or you die. Choose." Behind Elena, Thomas Chen's head appeared over the edge of the roof. He saw them and started to pull himself up, his movements powerful and efficient. The man was built like a linebacker, all muscle and menace. Elena ran. Her face twisted in pain with every step, but she didn't slow down. She hit the edge of the roof and launched herself across the gap. For a heart-stopping moment, Noah thought she wasn't going to make it. Her trajectory was low, her body language all wrong. But then she was crashing into him, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs on the opposite roof. "Go! Go! Go!" Elena shouted. Noah pulled her to her feet, and they ran for the fire escape on this building. Behind them, Thomas Chen landed his own jump effortlessly and gave chase. The man was fast, terrifyingly fast, closing the distance between them with frightening speed. They reached the fire escape and practically threw themselves down the metal stairs. Noah's hand screamed in protest as he gripped the railings, but he didn't let himself slow down. Elena was flagging, her movements becoming sluggish, the combination of injuries and exertion taking their toll. "Almost there," Noah said, more to himself than to Elena. They hit the ground-level alley just as Thomas reached the fire escape above them. Noah heard the distinctive sound of a gun being drawn. An instinct made him pull Elena behind a dumpster just as the first shot rang out. The bullet sparked off the pavement where they'd been standing a second before. Noah's heart hammered against his ribs. This was real. This was actually happening. Someone was shooting at them in broad daylight in downtown Seattle. "The Honda!" Elena gasped. "Parking garage 2 blocks east. Blue Honda Civic. License plate 7 Charlie Kilo 315. "Can you run? Can you carry me if I can't?" "If I have to." They broke from cover and ran. Another shot rang out, and Noah heard it slam into a brick wall to their left. Thomas was coming down the fire escape, would be on street level in seconds. They needed distance, needed cover, needed anything that would get them out of this kill zone. Noah spotted a group of morning commuters ahead, people walking to bus stops and coffee shops, oblivious to the violence unfolding behind them. He pulled Elena into the crowd, using bodies as shields, knowing that Thomas wouldn't risk shooting with so many witnesses around. They moved through the press of people, Elena leaning heavily on Noah, both of them trying to look like nothing was wrong, just two people in a hurry. Noah risked a glance back and saw Thomas standing at the mouth of the alley, scanning the crowd, his face a mask of cold calculation. Their eyes met for just a second, and Noah saw something in the man's expression that chilled him to the bone. Not anger, not frustration, just patient, inevitable certainty. The look of a predator who knew his prey was wounded and wouldn't get far. Then someone walked between them, breaking the eye contact, and Noah turned away and kept moving. The parking garage was an old structure, built decades ago, with narrow spaces and poor lighting. Elena directed him to the third level, where a blue Honda Civic sat in a corner spot. She pulled keys from her pocket and handed them to Noah. "You drive. I need to check if we were followed." Noah unlocked the car and helped Elena into the passenger seat before sliding behind the wheel. The Honda started immediately, and he backed out of the spot, his hands clumsy on the steering wheel. His paramedic training had never included evasive driving or combat situations. He felt wildly out of his depth. They spiraled down the levels of the garage, Noah checking the rearview mirror constantly for any sign of pursuit. Elena had her gun out, held low but ready, her eyes scanning every vehicle they passed. They reached the exit, and Noah pulled out into traffic, heading north without any real plan except to put distance between them and Thomas Chen. "He saw us," Noah said. "He knows what we look like, knows we're together. What's to stop him from tracking us to Port Angeles?" "Nothing," Elena said grimly, "which is why we're not going straight there. We need to make a stop first." "A stop? We're being hunted by a professional killer, and you want to make a stop?" "Marcus Voss's house is 20 minutes north of here. Bellevue, gated community, private security. Thomas will expect us to run. He won't expect us to go on offense." Noah nearly drove off the road. "You want to break into a crime boss's house while his enforcer is actively trying to kill us? That's insane." "It's necessary. The ledger, Noah. If I'm going to publish this story and make charges stick, I need that ledger. And this might be our only chance to get it. Once Thomas reports back that we escaped, Marcus will increase security, maybe move the ledger somewhere we can't reach it." Elena checked the magazine in her gun again, a nervous habit. "I know it's dangerous, but we're already in danger. Might as well make it count for something." Noah wanted to argue, wanted to turn the car toward Port Angeles and get to Sarah and forget about ledgers and evidence and exposing organizations. But Elena was right. If they didn't stop this at the source, if they didn't bring down the people at the top, Sarah would never truly be safe. None of them would. "Where in Bellevue?" he asked. Elena pulled out her phone and brought up a map, zooming in on a neighborhood of large houses behind walls and gates. "Here. Windermere Estates. Marcus lives in the house at the end of Lakeview Drive. I've been watching the property for weeks, documenting his patterns. He leaves for his office every morning at 8:30. His wife goes to yoga at 9. Staff has Saturdays off. Between 9 and noon, the house is empty." Noah checked the dashboard clock. 8:45. If Elena's intel was good, they had maybe 15 minutes to get in position. "Security?" "Cameras at the gate and main entrance, motion sensors on the ground floor, but there's a blind spot on the west side where a storm drain runs under the property line. We can access it from the neighbor's yard, follow the drainage tunnel, and come up through a basement window. I've done the recon. It's doable." "You've done the recon but never actually broken in?" "I was waiting for the right moment. This is it." Elena looked at him with an intensity that was hard to ignore. "I know you didn't sign up for this. I know you're just trying to find your wife. But this is how we protect her. This is how we make sure the organization can't hurt her again." Noah gripped the steering wheel hard enough that his knuckles turned white beneath the bandages. Every instinct he had was screaming that this was a terrible idea. But every memory of Lily asking why Mommy wasn't coming home, every night he'd spent alone in a bed that felt too big, every time he'd seen Sarah's empty chair at the dinner table, all of it fueled a rage that demanded action. "Tell me the plan," he said. "Every detail. Because if we're doing this, we're doing it smart. And we're doing it fast, and we're not dying in some rich asshole's house while my daughter waits for me at home." Elena smiled, and despite the bruises and burns and exhaustion, there was something fierce and alive in her expression. "That's the spirit. Now take the next exit and head for Bellevue. We've got work to do." The drive to Windermere Estates took 20 minutes through increasingly affluent neighborhoods. They ditched the Honda 3 blocks away in a grocery store parking lot and approached on foot, trying to look like joggers out for morning exercise. Elena had changed into less conspicuous clothes from a bag in the trunk, dark athletic wear that covered her bandages and made her look like any other Bellevue housewife working on her fitness. The neighborhood where Marcus Voss lived was the kind of place where lawns were measured with rulers and hedges were trimmed into geometric perfection. Every house was a monument to wealth and isolation, set back from the street behind walls and gates, and the unspoken promise that people like Noah and Elena didn't belong here. They approached the property adjacent to Marcus's house, where the blind spot Elena had mentioned supposedly existed. A tall wooden fence separated the properties, but Noah could see the storm drain she'd described. A concrete tunnel maybe 3 feet in diameter that ran under the fence line. "You're sure about this?" Noah asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Elena knelt by the storm drain entrance and peered inside. "Looks clear. I'll go first. If something goes wrong, if you hear alarms or gunshots, run. Get to Port Angeles, find Sarah, tell her everything." "Nothing's going to go wrong." "You don't know that." "Then I guess we better make sure it doesn't." Elena studied him for a moment, then nodded. She crawled into the storm drain, her movements hampered by her injuries but determined. Noah followed, the concrete cold and wet against his hands and knees. The tunnel was longer than he'd expected, maybe 40 feet, and claustrophobically narrow. His shoulders scraped against the sides, and he had to fight the urge to panic. They emerged into a recessed window, well on the far side, just as Elena had described. The basement window was old, the latch corroded from years of moisture exposure. Elena worked it with the small pry bar she'd brought, and after a few tense moments, the window swung open. They climbed into Marcus Voss's basement. The space was finished, expensively so, with plush carpeting and recessed lighting and the kind of furniture that cost more than Noah's truck. It was also, thankfully, empty. They stood still for a moment, listening for any indication they'd been detected. The house was silent except for the hum of climate control and the distant tick of a clock somewhere above them. "His office is on the second floor," Elena whispered. "That's where he keeps the sensitive documents. We go up, find the ledger, get out. 10 minutes maximum." They crept through the basement to a stairwell that led to the main floor. The house was a showcase of wealth. Marble floors, original art on the walls, furniture that belonged in museums. Noah felt like an intruder, not just in a physical space, but in an entirely different world. This was where the man who destroyed his family lived. This was the comfort purchased with other people's suffering. The second-floor hallway was lined with closed doors. Elena moved to the one at the end, which presumably led to the office. She tried the handle. Locked. "Of course," she muttered. She pulled a small case from her pocket, selected 2 thin metal tools, and went to work on the lock. Noah stood watch, his heart pounding so loud he was sure it could be heard throughout the house. The lock clicked open after what felt like an eternity, but was probably less than a minute. They slipped inside the office and closed the door behind them. The room was dominated by a massive desk, behind which floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Lake Washington. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A safe was set into another wall, its presence not even hidden. Marcus Voss was confident enough to keep his secrets in plain sight. "The safe," Elena said. "The ledger has to be in there." "Can you crack it?" "No, but I know someone who can." She pulled out her phone and took several photos of the safe from different angles, capturing the make and model. "This is a digital lock, biometric backup. We'd need specialized equipment to open it without the combination." "So what do we do?" "We take what we can and hope it's enough." Elena moved to the desk and started opening drawers, photographing documents, copying files onto a thumb drive she'd brought. Noah joined her, sorting through papers that might as well have been written in a foreign language for all he understood of their legal and financial jargon. But Elena seemed to know what she was looking for. "This is good," she said, photographing a ledger-style notebook filled with handwritten entries. "Financial transactions between organization members. And this," she held up a folder. "These are client contracts, evidence of the services they provide." Noah found a photo album tucked in the bottom drawer of the desk. He opened it, expecting family photos, and instead found surveillance pictures, people in everyday situations going about their lives unaware they were being watched, and in the margins, handwritten notes, dates, locations, patterns of behavior. One photo made him stop breathing. It was Sarah, taken through a telephoto lens walking out of a grocery store. The date written beneath it was from 6 months ago. And the note, subject maintaining cover, no suspicious contacts, recommend continued monitoring. They've been watching her, Noah said, his voice tight. This whole time they've been watching Sarah. Elena came to look over his shoulder, and he heard her sharp intake of breath. That means they know where she is. If they know, if they've been monitoring her, then she's not safe. She never was. Noah slammed the album shut. We need to get to Port Angeles now. Forget the ledger. Forget everything else. If Thomas realizes we escaped, if he reports to Marcus that we're trying to expose them, they'll eliminate any witnesses before we can publish, Elena finished, including Sarah. A sound from downstairs froze them both. The front door opening. Voices, a man and a woman speaking casually. Marcus Voss had come home early, and he hadn't come alone. Bedroom closet, Elena whispered. Now! They grabbed what they could, Elena's thumb drive, the photo album, a handful of documents, and fled the office as quietly as possible. The master bedroom was across the hall, its door blessedly unlocked. They slipped inside and into a walk-in closet that was larger than Noah's entire bedroom at home, pressing themselves behind hanging suits and designer dresses. Through the crack in the closet door, Noah could hear the voices getting closer. Marcus Voss, and based on the heels clicking on the marble floor, the woman Elena had identified as Diana Reeves. They were talking about the attempt on Elena's life. Thomas says she escaped, Diana was saying. Somehow she got out of the hospital with help. He tracked them to a safe house in Belltown, but they ran. He's looking for them now. How did Thomas let them escape? Marcus's voice was cold, controlled. He's supposed to be the best. There was a man with her, former paramedic named Noah Grant. He pulled Elena from the taxi, apparently. Thomas says Grant is resourceful, protective. Could be a problem. Noah heard footsteps ascending the stairs. They were coming to the second floor. He pressed himself further back into the closet, Elena barely breathing beside him. Noah Grant? Marcus repeated. Why does that name sound familiar? He was married to Sarah Grant, the woman from the Highway 2 incident 3 years ago, the one we convinced to disappear. A long pause. Then Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of humor. So the husband is trying to play hero. How touching. Does he know his wife is alive? Thomas assumes Elena told him. They went to her safe house together. Grant must know something. Then we have a larger problem than I thought. If Elena has convinced Grant to help her, if they're working together to expose us, we need to accelerate our timeline. Marcus's voice was closer now, just outside the bedroom. Contact all active clients. Tell them to go dark for the next 72 hours. Move any sensitive documents to secondary locations. And tell Thomas to stop playing cat and mouse. I want Elena Marlowe and Noah Grant dead by tonight. Make it look like a murder-suicide. Grieving husband finds out his wife's alive, can't handle it, kills the messenger and himself. Clean and tragic. What about Sarah Grant? If they're heading for Port Angeles and Thomas intercepts them before they get there, Sarah stays in place. We continue monitoring her as planned. But if by some miracle they reach her first, we eliminate all 3 of them together. A house fire, maybe. Or a car accident, something that ties up all the loose ends at once. Noah felt Elena's hand grip his arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. This was it. Confirmation that Sarah was in immediate danger, that their window for reaching her safely was closing fast, that the organization was preparing to burn everything down to protect themselves. Marcus and Diana entered the bedroom. Noah could see them now through the crack in the closet door. Marcus Voss was a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, silver hair and expensive suit, the kind of person who commanded respect in legitimate business circles. Diana Reeves was younger, maybe 40, beautiful in a cold, calculating way. Marcus went to a dresser and pulled out a handgun, checking it with practiced efficiency. I'm going to Port Angeles myself, he said. Diana, you handle things here. Make sure Thomas has everything he needs to find Grant and Marlowe. I'll make sure Sarah Grant doesn't become a problem. You're going personally? Is that wise? This operation has survived for 15 years because I handle critical situations myself. Sarah Grant is a critical situation. If she talks, if she testifies, the entire structure collapses. I'm not leaving that to anyone else. Marcus tucked the gun into a shoulder holster beneath his suit jacket. Besides, I want to look her in the eye when I do it. She's caused me 3 years of anxiety. I think I've earned that satisfaction. They left the bedroom, still talking, their voices fading as they descended the stairs. Noah and Elena waited in the closet for another 5 minutes, listening to the sounds of the house. The front door opened and closed. A car engine started in the driveway. Then silence. "We need to move," Elena said. "If Marcus is going to Port Angeles, he's got maybe a 3-hour head start on us by the time we get out of here and on the road." Noah's mind was racing, calculating distances and drive times. "Can we call Sarah, warn her?" "Not from our phones. They're probably being monitored, but there's a burner phone in my go bag, the one I left at the safe house." Elena's face twisted in frustration. "We're going to have to risk going back." "That's exactly what Thomas will expect. He'll have the place staked out." "Then we don't go in. We call the apartment from a payphone, access the voicemail remotely, get the burner phone number I have stored there. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got." They emerged from the closet cautiously, checking to make sure the house was truly empty. Moving quickly now, they retraced their steps through the bedroom, down the hall, past the office they'd burglarized. On the main floor, Noah spotted Marcus's keys sitting on a table near the front door. Next to them was a file folder labeled Port Angeles Operations. Noah grabbed both the keys and the folder. Elena stared at him. "What are you doing?" "Buying us time." Noah pointed out the window to where a black Mercedes sat in the circular driveway. "That's probably Marcus's car. We take it. He has to find another way to Port Angeles. Every minute we delay him is another minute Sarah stays alive." "That's grand theft auto." "Add it to the list of crimes we're committing today." Noah headed for the front door. "Come on, we can worry about the legal consequences after we save my wife's life." They climbed into the Mercedes, and Noah started it with Marcus's keys. The car was everything his truck wasn't: smooth, powerful, equipped with more technology than seemed necessary for basic transportation. He backed out of the driveway and headed for the gate, which opened automatically as they approached. As they drove away from Windermere Estates, Noah opened the Port Angeles folder one-handed. Inside were surveillance photos of Sarah, detailed logs of her daily routine, maps of her neighborhood with strategic observation points marked, and a typed report summarizing 3 years of monitoring. His wife had been living in a cage, just as Elena had said. Watched constantly. Her every movement documented. Her freedom an illusion maintained by people who could take it away whenever they chose. "We're getting her out," Noah said, more to himself than Elena. "Whatever it takes, we're getting her out and ending this." Elena was on her phone, trying to reach her burner's voicemail. Come on," she muttered. Then, "Got it. Sarah's number is here. She's been using it for the past year at least. I'm calling now." She dialed and put the phone on speaker. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. "You've reached Claire. Leave a message." Sarah's voice. Noah's heart clenched at the sound of it. 3 years, and he'd almost forgotten exactly how she sounded. The slight rasp, the way she pronounced her vowels, the warmth that came through even in an impersonal voicemail greeting. "Sarah, it's Elena," Elena said after the beep. "Listen to me very carefully. They're coming for you. Marcus Voss is on his way to Port Angeles right now, and he's planning to kill you. You need to leave immediately. Don't pack, don't wait, just get out. Go somewhere public, somewhere with cameras and witnesses. I'm coming with someone who can help. Stay alive until we get there. Please, Sarah, run." She hung up and met Noah's eyes. "That's all we can do for now. Drive fast." Noah pressed the accelerator, and the Mercedes surged forward, carrying them north toward Port Angeles and Sarah, and a confrontation that had been building for 3 years. Behind them, Seattle disappeared in the rearview mirror. Ahead of them, mountains and water and the unknown. And somewhere at the end of this desperate race, a woman who'd been dead to the world was waiting to be brought back to life or buried forever. The road stretched out before them, and Noah drove like fury itself was chasing them. Because it was. The Mercedes ate up the miles with predatory efficiency. its engine purring as Noah pushed it well past the speed limit on Highway 101. The landscape transformed around them as they left the urban sprawl behind, dense forests closing in on both sides of the road, the occasional glimpse of water through the trees, mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. Noah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his bandages had started to seep blood through the gauze, but he didn't care. Every second counted. Every mile brought them closer to Sarah and further from any illusion of safety. Elena had her laptop balanced on her knees, connected to the car's Wi-Fi hotspot, typing frantically. "I'm uploading everything we found to 3 separate cloud servers," she said without looking up. "If something happens to us, if we don't make it, at least the evidence survives. My editor has instructions to publish if I don't check in by tomorrow morning." "We're going to make it," Noah said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "You don't know that. Marcus has resources we can't match. Money, people, connections. He's probably already made calls, arranged backup, set traps we can't even anticipate." Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard. "And Thomas Chen is still out there somewhere, hunting us. For all we know, he's already on his way to Port Angeles, too." Noah's phone, the one he'd powered off and dismantled hours ago, sat in the cup holder between them like a ticking time bomb. He'd been thinking about Lily constantly, the promise he'd made to take her to the bookstore and out for pizza. She was probably worried by now. Mrs. Chen was probably fielding questions she had no good answers for, and he couldn't call, couldn't even send a text, because the moment he powered that phone on, he'd be broadcasting their location to anyone who might be looking. "After this is over," Noah said, "assuming we survive, what happens to Sarah legally? You said she might face charges for insurance fraud." Elena saved her work and closed the laptop. "It's complicated. Technically, she participated in a staged death and accepted a false identity. But she was under duress, threatened with death if she didn't comply. A good lawyer could argue coercion, make a case for witness protection rather than prosecution. The bigger problem is going to be proving her story without getting her killed in the process. So even if we find her, even if we get her away from Marcus, she might still end up in prison. It's possible. But the alternative is leaving her in hiding forever, which is just a different kind of prison." Elena turned to look at him, her bruised face serious. "Noah, you need to understand something. Even in the best-case scenario, even if everything goes perfectly and the organization gets taken down and Sarah's coercion is recognized, life isn't going to just go back to normal. She's been gone for 3 years. She's a different person now. You're a different person. Lily doesn't really remember her. The family you had is gone. What you might get back is something new, something that has to be built from scratch." "I know that," Noah said, though hearing it stated so baldly still hurt. "But she's alive. That's what matters. Everything else we can figure out." They drove in silence for a while, the road winding through increasingly dense forest. The GPS showed another 90 minutes to Port Angeles, and Noah's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed past 80, past 90. Trees blurred past the windows. His heart hammered in sync with the engine's roar. "Tell me about the women's shelter," Noah said suddenly. "Where Sarah works. You said you'd been watching her." Elena nodded. "Hope House. It's a shelter for women escaping domestic violence, funded by a mix of grants and private donations. Sarah, Claire, as she's known there, works as an intake coordinator. She helps new arrivals navigate the system, connects them with resources, provides emotional support. By all accounts, she's exceptional at it. The director wrote a letter of recommendation last year calling her the most compassionate person on staff." Noah felt something twist in his chest. Of course Sarah would gravitate toward helping people in crisis. She'd always had that quality, a fierce protectiveness toward the vulnerable, an inability to look away from suffering. It was what had made her such a good paramedic. And it was probably what kept her sane during 3 years of isolation, knowing she was making a difference in other people's lives, even if she couldn't have her own life back. "Does she live at the shelter?" "No. She has a small apartment about 3 blocks away. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, faces the street. I've never been inside, but I've watched her through the windows. She reads a lot, keeps the place neat. No visitors that I've seen, no social life to speak of. She goes to work, comes home, sometimes walks along the waterfront at sunset. That's it. That's her entire world. The image Elena painted was devastating in its loneliness. Noah tried to imagine Sarah, his Sarah, who'd loved hosting dinner parties and playing board games and taking Lily to the park, reduced to such a small, careful existence. 3 years of looking over her shoulder, 3 years of being someone else, 3 years of missing her daughter grow up. The surveillance photos Marcus had, Noah said. How recent were they? The most recent one I saw was from last week. They've been consistent about monitoring her, probably quarterly check-ins to make sure she's maintaining cover and not causing problems. Elena pulled out her phone and checked for messages. Nothing. If Sarah got my voicemail, she's not responding. Either her phone is off or... Don't! Noah interrupted. Don't finish that sentence. But they both knew what the alternative was. Either Sarah had gotten the warning and was already running, or Marcus had somehow reached her first despite their head start, and the warning had come too late. The miles continued to unspool beneath their wheels. They passed through small towns that felt like they existed in a different era. Mom and pop diners, hardware stores with hand-painted signs, houses with flags hanging from porches. Normal life, continuing obliviously while Noah's world balanced on a knife's edge. Elena's phone rang, the sound so sudden and loud in the car's quiet that they both jumped. She looked at the screen, her face going pale. "It's my editor. I need to take this," she answered, putting it on speaker. "Richard, this isn't a good time." "Elena, where the hell are you?" The man's voice was sharp with concern. "Your apartment in Belltown was broken into this morning. Police found blood, signs of a struggle. They're asking me questions I can't answer because you won't return my calls." "I'm fine. I'm working. The story is almost ready." "The story about the insurance fraud ring?" "Elena, I told you to be careful with that. If these people are as dangerous as you claim, they are. They tried to kill me last night. Blew up a taxi I was riding in. The driver died." Elena's voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm with someone who can corroborate everything. We're gathering the final pieces of evidence now. I'll have the full story to you by Monday morning, as planned." There was a long silence on the other end, then, "Elena, listen to me. If you're in danger, if people are trying to kill you, you need to go to the police. Let the authorities handle this. The authorities are compromised. The organization has people in law enforcement, in government agencies, everywhere that matters. Going to the police would be signing my death warrant." Elena glanced at Noah, then back to the phone. "I'm sorry, Richard. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you agreed to publish my work, but I'm seeing this through. Either the story goes live on Monday, or you'll hear I died in some tragic accident, and you'll know they got to me. Either way, the truth comes out. Don't talk like that. Just be careful, please, and call me as soon as you're somewhere safe." "I will. Thank you for believing in this story." She hung up, and the car fell silent again, except for the road noise and the engine's hum. Noah could see the tension in Elena's shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as she put the phone away. She was scared, he realized. She'd been doing a good job hiding it behind determination and dry humor, but she was absolutely terrified. "You could still walk away," Noah said. "Drop me off somewhere, give me the information you have, and disappear. Change your name the way Sarah did. Start over somewhere Marcus and his people will never find you." "I could," Elena agreed, "but I won't. I've spent 8 months on this story. I've documented every crime, every victim, every dollar they've stolen. I've watched families grieve for people who aren't really dead, and people who are actually dead because they knew too much. I'm not walking away now, not when I'm this close to ending it. Even if it gets you killed? Especially then. Because if I die, Richard publishes the story anyway, and the organization still falls. My death would just be additional proof of everything I've documented." Elena managed a weak smile. "Besides, I've got you watching my back now. Former paramedic, family man, apparently willing to commit multiple felonies for a woman he's never met. I'm thinking my survival odds just went up." "Ish, you're insane." "Probably, but so are you, or you wouldn't be here." She had a point. 24 hours ago, Noah had been a normal person living a normal life. Now he was driving a stolen car loaded with evidence obtained through breaking and entering, racing to save a wife who was supposed to be dead, planning to confront people who killed without hesitation. When had he become this person? When had his life turned into something out of a crime thriller? The answer was simple. The moment he'd seen Sarah's locket around Elena's neck. The moment he'd realized everything he'd believed for 3 years was a lie. Some things were worth any risk, any consequence. Sarah was one of those things. Their family was one of those things. The GPS announced they were 30 minutes from Port Angeles. Noah's pulse quickened. They were almost there, almost to the moment of truth. "What's the plan when we arrive?" Noah asked. "We don't know if Sarah got the message. Don't know if Marcus is already there. Don't know if we're walking into a trap." Elena pulled up a map on her phone. Hope House is here, downtown area, busy street with good visibility. Sarah's apartment is here, residential neighborhood, more isolated. If she got my message and ran, she'd probably go to the shelter. Public place, other people around, harder for Marcus to make a move without witnesses. If she didn't get the message, she's either at work or at home, following her normal Saturday routine. And if Marcus got to her first? Then we're too late, and we need to disappear before he comes after us. Elena's jaw set. But I don't think we're too late. Marcus left Bellevue maybe 30 minutes before we did, and we've been driving faster. We might actually beat him there. Might isn't good enough. It's all we've got. They crested a hill, and suddenly the town of Port Angeles spread out before them. A small city nestled between mountains and water, the Strait of Juan de Fuca glittering in the afternoon sun. Ferries moved across the water toward Victoria. Seabirds wheeled overhead. It looked peaceful, picturesque, completely at odds with the violence Noah knew was converging on this place. He took the exit into town, following Elena's directions through residential streets lined with modest houses and old trees. The GPS showed them approaching Sarah's apartment first, and Noah slowed the Mercedes to a crawl as they passed the address. It was a converted house, split into 4 units, exactly as Elena had described. Second floor, front-facing window. Noah's eyes went to that window, searching for any sign of movement, any indication Sarah was home. The curtains were drawn, no lights visible, nothing to suggest occupancy. "Keep driving," Elena said. "Don't stop. If anyone's watching, we can't tip them off." Noah circled the block, his heart pounding. Part of him wanted to run up those stairs, pound on the door, call Sarah's name until she answered. But the rational part of his brain knew Elena was right. They had to be smart about this. "The shelter," he said. "Let's try there first." Hope House occupied a nondescript building that could have been anything, an office, a clinic, a community center. Only a small sign by the door indicated its purpose. Noah parked the Mercedes across the street where they had a clear view of the entrance and killed the engine. "Now we wait," Elena said. "If Sarah's inside, she'll come out eventually. If she's not, we'll have to risk going in and asking for her." They sat in silence, watching the building. A few women came and went, some with children, all of them moving with the particular wariness of people who'd learned to always check their surroundings. Noah's medical training kicked in automatically, assessing what he could see from a distance. Bruises poorly covered with makeup, nervous body language, the way they kept their heads down. These were people who'd been hurt and were learning to survive. Sarah had chosen to work with these women, had dedicated her new life to helping them. Noah tried to reconcile that with the woman he'd known, the paramedic who'd faced down drunk drivers and gang violence without flinching, who'd sung off-key lullabies to Lily, who'd beaten him at poker with a terrible bluff face and pure stubbornness. "There," Elena said suddenly, pointing. A woman had emerged from Hope House, turning to lock the door behind her, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Slim build, wearing jeans and a sweater against the afternoon chill. She moved with purpose, checking her phone as she walked, heading down the street away from where Noah and Elena sat. It was Sarah. Noah knew it with absolute certainty even before he could see her face clearly. The way she walked, the set of her shoulders, the gesture she made brushing hair behind her ear, all of it achingly familiar despite 3 years of separation. "That's her," he breathed. "That's my wife." Elena was already moving, opening her door. "Come on, we need to reach her before—" A black sedan pulled around the corner ahead of Sarah, moving slowly, deliberately. Noah's instincts screamed danger even before he saw the driver. Marcus Voss sat behind the wheel, his window down, his attention locked on the woman walking alone down the sidewalk. He'd found her. Somehow, despite their head start, despite everything, Marcus had beaten them here and found Sarah first. No, Noah said, and then he was running. He burst from the Mercedes without conscious thought, his legs pumping, his bandaged hands swinging at his sides. Elena shouted something behind him, but he didn't stop, didn't slow down. 50 yards separated him from Sarah. 40. 30. He saw her turn, saw her notice the sedan keeping pace with her, saw the moment recognition and fear flooded her face. Marcus's car accelerated. He was going to jump the curb, was going to hit Sarah, was going to make it look like a tragic accident. Noah put on a burst of speed, his lungs burning, his legs screaming protest. "Sarah!" he shouted. "Run!" She looked toward his voice, and her face, her beautiful, impossible face, registered shock and confusion. She froze for a critical second, and then Marcus's sedan jumped the curb, and she was diving sideways, rolling across someone's lawn as the car missed her by inches. Noah reached her as she scrambled to her feet. Up close, Sarah was even more familiar and more changed than he'd expected. The same dark eyes, the same mouth, the same scar above her eyebrow. But there were new lines around her eyes, a hardness in her expression that hadn't been there before. This was a woman who had spent 3 years looking over her shoulder. "Noah?" she whispered, and the sound of his name in her voice nearly broke him. How are you?" "No time," Noah said, grabbing her hand. "We have to go, now." Marcus had stopped the sedan and was reversing, preparing for another pass. Elena had pulled the Mercedes alongside them, the passenger door open. Noah practically threw Sarah into the back seat and dove in after her while Elena hit the gas. The Mercedes lurched forward, tires squealing. Behind them, Marcus gave chase, his sedan powerful and driven by cold determination. They raced through Port Angeles' quiet streets, blowing through stop signs, weaving around other cars, the kind of high-speed chase that belonged in movies, not in a small coastal town on a Saturday afternoon. "What's happening?" Sarah demanded, her voice high with panic. "Noah, you're supposed to be—" "Elena, you said you'd never come back. Why is Marcus—" "They're trying to kill you," Elena said, taking a corner fast enough to make the Mercedes' tires protest. "Marcus found out we were coming for you. He's here to tie up loose ends before my story goes public." "Story? What story?" Noah turned to look at his wife, his living, breathing wife, and felt 3 years of grief and anger and love crash over him like a wave. "Elena's exposing the organization, everything they've done, everyone they've hurt. It's over, Sarah. The hiding, the fake identity, all of it. It's finally over." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "It's never over. You don't understand. They'll kill us all. They'll kill Lily. Oh God, Lily. Noah, where's our daughter? Is she safe?" "She's with Mrs. Chen. She's fine. She doesn't know anything about this." Noah reached out and took Sarah's hand, feeling the warm reality of her skin against his. "But we need to stop Marcus before he makes another move. Elena, where are we going?" "Away from populated areas. If Marcus is willing to run Sarah down in broad daylight, he's desperate. We need somewhere isolated where we can deal with this without putting civilians at risk." Elena checked the rearview mirror. Marcus's sedan was still behind them, keeping pace. "There's a state park north of here, Hurricane Ridge. Lots of winding mountain roads, few visitors this time of year. We could lose him there or force a confrontation on our terms. Or he could run us off a cliff," Noah pointed out. "Do you have a better idea?" He didn't. Noah looked at Sarah, who was staring at him like he was a ghost, her hand clutching his with desperate strength. 3 years. 3 years of believing she was dead, and now she was here, real and alive and terrified, and he had no idea how to protect her. "Hurricane Ridge," he said. "Do it." Elena took a sharp right onto a road that led out of town and into the mountains. The landscape changed quickly, houses giving way to forest, pavement becoming narrower and more winding. The Mercedes climbed, its engine working hard, trees pressing in on both sides. Behind them, Marcus followed relentlessly. He wasn't trying to catch them yet, Noah realized, just keeping them in sight, driving them further from help, from witnesses, from any possibility of escape. This was a predator playing with its prey, confident in the eventual outcome. "There has to be another way off this mountain," Noah said. "Another road, a trail, something." Hurricane Ridge is a dead end, Elena said grimly. There's the visitor center at the top, but this time of year it's probably closed. After that, it's just hiking trails and wilderness. No other roads out. So we're trapped. We're cornered. There's a difference. The road continued to climb, switchback after switchback, the drop-off getting steeper and more terrifying with each turn. Sarah had gone quiet, her hand still locked with Noah's, her breathing shallow and rapid. He could feel her pulse racing where their wrists touched. I dreamed about this, Sarah said suddenly, her voice barely audible. Not this exactly, but seeing you again. I'd wake up crying because even in my dreams I couldn't tell you the truth, couldn't touch you, couldn't come home. She turned to look at him, and her eyes were full of 3 years of accumulated pain. I'm so sorry, Noah, for everything. For leaving you to raise Lily alone, for letting you think I was dead, for... Later, Noah interrupted, squeezing her hand. We'll have time for apologies and explanations later. Right now, we just need to survive. The visitor center appeared ahead, a wooden structure perched on the mountainside, its parking lot empty as Elena had predicted. Beyond it, hiking trails disappeared into dense forest, and further still, snow-capped peaks rose against a darkening sky. Elena pulled into the parking lot and stopped the Mercedes at the far end near the trailhead. Marcus's sedan pulled in behind them, blocking the only exit. They were well and truly trapped now. Marcus stepped out of his car, and Noah saw he was holding a gun. Not concealed, not hidden, just openly displayed because there was no one here to see it, no one to intervene. The man looked calm, almost bored, like this was just another day of business. Elena Marlowe, Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the empty parking lot. I'll admit, I underestimated you. Getting this far, convincing Noah Grant to help you, stealing my car, very resourceful. But you must know this ends here. Come out, and I'll make it quick. Make me chase you into those woods, and I'll make sure you suffer first. He's bluffing, Elena said, though her white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel suggested she didn't believe it. He won't risk gunshots. Sound carries in the mountains. Even with no one here, someone could hear. I don't think he cares anymore, Sarah said. When Marcus decides someone needs to die, they die. He doesn't make empty threats. Noah looked between the two women, Elena, who'd risked everything to expose a criminal empire, and Sarah, who'd survived 3 years in hiding, and made a decision. You two stay in the car. Lock the doors. I'm going to talk to him. Noah, no! Sarah started, but he was already opening his door. He stepped out into the cold mountain air, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. Marcus watched him approach, the gun held loosely but ready. Noah Grant, Marcus said when they were 10 feet apart. The grieving husband. I suppose Elena told you the truth about your wife. She told me everything. About the organization, about what you forced Sarah to do, about all the families you've destroyed for profit. Noah kept his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. It's over, Marcus. Elena has all the evidence she needs. By Monday, the world knows what you've done. Killing us won't change that. Perhaps not, but it will be satisfying nonetheless. Marcus's expression didn't change. You should have stayed out of this, Noah. Sarah made her choice 3 years ago. She chose to live, even if it meant abandoning her family. You should have let the dead stay dead. She's not dead. She never was. You made her pretend to be because she discovered your operation. Noah took a step closer, drawing Marcus's attention away from the car. But you know what? She did something good with the life you gave her. She helped people. She made a difference. What have you done except profit from other people's suffering? I provide a service. People come to me desperate, and I give them a second chance. That's more than most people ever get. You're a predator. You exploit desperation and call it business. You kill anyone who threatens your profits and call it necessity. But it's all just murder dressed up in paperwork and fake accidents. Marcus's finger moved to the trigger. Philosophical debates aside, you're in my way. Move, and I might let you live long enough to watch me put a bullet in Elena's skull. That's when Thomas Chen stepped out of the forest. Noah hadn't heard him approach, hadn't seen any sign of his presence, but suddenly the big man was there, emerging from the tree line like a nightmare made flesh. He had a gun too, and it was pointed at the Mercedes where Elena and Sarah sat. Found them, just like you said they'd be, Thomas called to Marcus. All three of them, delivered right to us. You want me to handle the women while you finish with Grant? Noah's blood turned to ice. They'd been herded here deliberately. Marcus had chased them, not to catch them, but to drive them to this isolated location where Thomas was waiting. This had been a trap from the beginning. Inside the Mercedes, Elena had seen Thomas too. Noah watched her face harden with decision, watched her reach for something under her seat, the gun she'd taken from her safe house. She was going to make a stand. No, Noah said, loud enough for both Marcus and Thomas to hear. You want to kill someone? Kill me. Let them go. Let Sarah take Elena and leave, and you can do whatever you want to me. I won't fight back, won't run. Just let them go. Marcus actually laughed. Noble, stupid, but noble. Unfortunately, I can't take that deal. Sarah knows too much. Elena has documented too much. You've seen too much. All three of you die here today, and the story is a tragic hiking accident. Car went off the road, 3 bodies found in the wreckage. Clean, simple, untraceable to me. Except Elena uploaded all her evidence to the cloud before we got here, Noah said. Her editor has instructions to publish if she doesn't check in. Killing her just guarantees the story goes public faster. Marcus's expression finally shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. You're bluffing. I'm not. But you know what? Even if I was, even if there was no evidence stored anywhere, even if you could make us all disappear without a trace, it wouldn't matter. Because the truth has a way of coming out. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually. And when it does, everything you've built comes crashing down. For a long moment, the mountain was silent except for the wind in the trees and the distant cry of a hawk. Marcus and Noah stared at each other across 10 feet of empty space, and Noah could see the calculation happening behind the man's eyes. The weighing of risks and rewards, the assessment of options, the cold math of survival. Then Elena opened the car door and stepped out, her gun raised and steady despite her injured arms. He's telling the truth, Marcus, about the evidence, about the publication timeline, all of it. You're done. The only question now is whether you die here trying to kill us, or you surrender and take your chances with the legal system. I'm not going to prison, Marcus said flatly. Then I guess we're doing this the hard way. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion and at lightning speed simultaneously. Thomas swung his gun toward Elena. Marcus raised his weapon toward Noah. Elena fired first, her shot catching Thomas in the shoulder and spinning him around. Thomas returned fire, his bullet shattering the Mercedes' windshield. Noah dove toward Marcus, tackling the man before he could get a shot off. They hit the ground hard, Marcus's gun skittering away across the pavement. The older man was stronger than he looked, twisting beneath Noah, trying to reach his weapon. Noah grabbed his wrist, remembering years of hand-to-hand training from his paramedic days, using body weight and leverage to keep Marcus pinned. Behind them, Elena and Thomas were exchanging fire, both taking cover behind their respective vehicles. Sarah had climbed into the driver's seat of the Mercedes and was trying to start it despite the shattered windshield and Noah's absence from the passenger seat. The engine roared to life. Marcus's elbow caught Noah in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Noah's grip loosened, and Marcus broke free, scrambling toward his gun. Noah lunged after him, his bandaged hands grabbing Marcus's ankle, pulling him back. They wrestled across the cold pavement, trading positions, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. Then Sarah was there, having abandoned the car, and she was holding a rock the size of a baseball. She brought it down on the back of Marcus's head with all the force of 3 years of fear and rage and survival. The man went limp. Noah rolled away, gasping, his ribs screaming. Is he unconscious? Maybe worse. I don't care. Sarah's hands were shaking, but her voice was steel. Elena needs help. They looked toward where Elena and Thomas were still exchanging fire, both wounded now, both running on adrenaline and determination. Thomas had taken cover behind a large boulder at the edge of the parking lot. Elena was crouched behind Marcus's sedan, trying to reload with trembling, burned hands. Noah made a decision. He grabbed Marcus's gun from where it had fallen and ran toward Thomas's position. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't trained for combat, but he'd spent 7 years running toward danger instead of away from it. Some instincts never died. Thomas Chen, he shouted. Drop your weapon. It's over. Thomas turned, saw Noah approaching with a gun, and made his own calculation. He was injured, outnumbered, his boss unconscious or dead. The smart play was surrender. But Thomas Chen hadn't built a reputation on making smart plays. He raised his gun. Noah fired first. The shot went wild, missing Thomas entirely but close enough to make him flinch. Elena used the distraction to move from cover, her own gun trained on Thomas from a different angle. Caught between two shooters, Thomas finally raised his hands. "Drop it," Elena commanded, her voice steady despite everything. "Drop the gun and step away from it. Slowly." Thomas complied, setting his weapon on the ground and kicking it away. Blood soaked his shoulder where Elena's first shot had hit him. He looked at them with something that might have been respect mixed with frustration. "You should have stayed dead, Sarah," he said. "All of this could have been avoided." "I was never dead," Sarah replied, walking up to stand beside Noah. "Just buried alive. There's a difference." Elena kept her gun trained on Thomas, while Noah moved to check on Marcus. The man was breathing but unconscious, blood matting his silver hair where Sarah had struck him. Noah's paramedic training kicked in automatically, checking for signs of skull fracture or concussion, even though part of him wanted to let Marcus lie there and suffer. "He'll live," Noah announced. "He needs medical attention, but he'll live to stand trial." The adrenaline was starting to wear off, leaving Noah shaking and exhausted. His hands throbbed where the bandages had torn open. His ribs ached from Marcus's elbow. Every part of him hurt. But standing there in the parking lot at Hurricane Ridge, with Sarah alive beside him and Marcus Voss finally defeated, Noah felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. "Now what?" Sarah asked, and her voice was small, uncertain. "What happens now?" "Now we call the police," Elena said, pulling out her phone. "The real police, the ones not on Marcus's payroll. We hand over Marcus and Thomas, along with all the evidence I've gathered. We tell them everything, and we let the legal system do what it's supposed to do." "And then?" Sarah looked at Noah, her eyes full of questions and fears and 3 years of accumulated longing. "What happens to us?" Noah reached out and took her hand, the same gesture he'd made 1,000 times during their marriage, now weighted with new meaning. "I don't know," he admitted. "We figure it out together, one day at a time, the way we should have done 3 years ago if these people hadn't taken that choice away from us." Sarah's tears came then, 3 years worth breaking free all at once. She collapsed against Noah, and he held her while she sobbed, held her the way he'd wanted to hold her at the funeral, held her like he'd never let go again. Elena was on the phone with the police, giving their location, explaining in calm, professional terms that they'd apprehended 2 suspects in connection with a criminal organization, that there had been shots fired but everyone was stable, that they needed officers and ambulances and probably the FBI given the scope of what they'd uncovered. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere far away, Noah's daughter was probably finishing dinner, probably asking Mrs. Chen again when Daddy was coming home. Soon, Noah thought. He'd be home soon, and this time, maybe, he'd be bringing someone with him. Sarah pulled back slightly, wiping at her eyes. "Lily," she said. "I want to see Lily. I know I don't have the right. I know she probably doesn't even remember me, but she remembers," Noah said gently. "Not everything, but enough. And she asks about you. Questions I've never known how to answer because I thought you were gone forever." He brushed a strand of hair from Sarah's face, the gesture achingly familiar. "We'll figure it out, together, as a family, whatever that looks like now." The sound of sirens echoed up from the valley below. Help was coming, bringing with it all the complications and consequences Noah knew were waiting. Legal battles, media attention, the slow, painful process of rebuilding a life that had been shattered 3 years ago. But standing there with Sarah's hand in his, watching Elena end the call and smile with weary triumph, seeing Marcus Voss's unconscious form and knowing the man would finally face justice, Noah thought maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The family that had been torn apart by lies might find a way to be whole again through truth. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be the simple, happy ending he'd imagined during the long, lonely nights after Sarah's supposed death. But it would be real. And after 3 years of living with ghosts and lies and impossible grief, real was enough. Real was everything. The first police car crested the hill, lights flashing in the gathering dusk, and Noah squeezed Sarah's hand and prepared to tell the truth at last. The first officer out of the patrol car was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a hand resting on her service weapon. She took in the scene with professional efficiency. 2 wounded men on the ground, 3 people standing over them, weapons visible, the shattered windshield of an expensive Mercedes, and the general air of violence recently concluded. "Everyone put your hands where I can see them," she commanded, her voice brooking no argument. "Weapons on the ground, slowly." Elena complied immediately, setting her gun down and raising her hands. Noah did the same with Marcus's weapon, though his movements were stiff and awkward from exhaustion and injury. Sarah raised empty hands, her face pale but composed. "I'm Elena Marlowe," Elena said, her voice steady. "I'm the one who called this in. These 2 men," she gestured to Marcus,